Story 1. Cosmic Wonders is the very last storefront on Main Street in the quiet town of August Cove, Long Island. Its exterior is pristine to match the eloquent small boutiques that line the town's square. However, the inside is a clutter of ancient and often mysterious items. The antique store has been around for almost 20 years. Clint Quirtley, the eccentric owner, has become a local legend of sorts. He's quirky, light-hearted, mysterious, and energetic. With his long, white, straggly hair, his crooked nose, and his solemn face, most people would guess he was somewhere between 65 and 75. No one would believe it if they knew he was actually 122 years old. He was born in Southampton, England in 1903, and at the age of 9, he was one of the lucky survivors of the Titanic. During his escape, he pocketed whatever small, rare artifacts he could grab. From that day forward, his obsession with strange and mysterious antiques began. Clint sits behind a cluttered counter consisting of different rings, pendants, playing cards, and a strange-looking ashtray. While reading the newspaper, he notices an article about a local wedding. Bobby Bridgeton and Nancy Englewood tie the knot last night at Water Lily's Pond. "Son of a bitch did it," Clint says to no one. A small bell rings from the front of the store, and Jennifer D'Angelo, mid-40s and haggard, enters. 3 years ago, she was a total knockout, but stress the last few years really did a number on her. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Can I help you?" Jennifer slowly makes her way to the front counter, looking at random things as she passes. She notices a statue about 3 feet high that has the body of a chiseled man with the head of a Rottweiler. She's nervous and feels a sense of foreboding. She picks up a lighter and tries to spark it. Nothing happens. Clint watches her curiously as she moves through the store. She passes a small bottle with a splinter of wood inside, sitting next to a card that reads, "From the deck of the Titanic." She's almost at the counter and picks up a picture frame. It's a Tom Brady rookie card with his autograph on it. She puts it back down and approaches the counter. "This is an interesting store you have here," Jennifer says. "Thank you, my dear. Are you looking for anything in particular?" "Sebastian Anton told me to talk to you." "Gonna have to be a little more specific than that, I'm afraid." Jennifer, avoiding eye contact with Clint, looks around the store. "He was here about 2 years ago. Told me to ask you about my heart's desire." "Ah, yes, I remember Sebastian. Nice kid." Clint studies Jennifer for a moment. "How's he been?" "Good, actually. After meeting you, he reunited with his biological parents." "Happy to hear." Clint pauses a second. Jennifer picks up the playing cards from the counter and is about to open them. "I wouldn't open those in here if I were you," Clint warns. "Why not?" "I just wouldn't, is all." Jennifer nods. "What's up with that statue by the door?" "She protects the place." How so?" "Break in one night and you'll see." Clint laughs. It's hard to tell if he is joking or serious. Jennifer walks over to the piece of wood in the glass bottle. "And how am I to believe that this piece of wood is actually from the Titanic?" "I know the person who plucked it off the deck." "Is that so?" "Scout's honor." She moves over to the Tom Brady card. "And this is authentic?" "It is," he says. "And I should believe you because before moving here I had a shop in Michigan. He worked for me one summer when he was in college," Clint says, grinning. Jennifer nods, not believing him. "And what's that over there behind you?" She points to a small rusty watch, clearly a little nervous with all the small talk. "That's a watch that allows you to go back in time by 5 minutes." Jennifer laughs. "But you're not here for any of these things. It's the heart's desire you're after, right?" Jennifer takes a deep breath, then nods. "I must say, I'm skeptical, but after hearing Sebastian's story, I have to give it a chance. It's my last hope for—" "Stop," Clint quickly replies. "Don't tell me what you're looking for. I don't ask questions." "How does it work?" "It's very simple, and I'll explain all of that if you decide to move forward." "I'm here, aren't I?" "Yes, I suppose you are, but to see the heart's desire is by appointment only, so let's schedule a time." "Can't I today?" she pleads. "It's really urgent. See my Again, he interrupts, aggravated. "Don't tell me. It requires a 24-hour grace period. I don't make the rules. I follow the way it's supposed to be." Jennifer is annoyed, but sees no point in arguing. She looks down at her watch. "Can I come back at 4 o'clock tomorrow?" Clint pulls out a worn leather binder and opens it. Dust fills the air. He turns a few pages, then nods. "Perfect." She nods. "I can pay now if you'd like. Sebastian did warn me it's a little expensive." She pulls out her wallet and produces a credit card. Clint looks at the card and points to a small wooden sign that reads, "Cash only, no refunds. You can bring cash with you tomorrow." Jennifer nods. "Is it still $3,500? $4,000, I'm afraid." Jennifer hesitantly agrees. "If this does what it's supposed to, it'll be worth it." Clint gives her a small smile. She turns to leave. "I must warn you," Clint calls out. She stops and turns to look at him. The effects of the heart's desire are permanent. Jennifer hears a low, beating heart faintly in the background. She isn't sure if she's hearing things. She focuses on the sound while Clint continues to talk. "They can't be undone. Every person only gets one request, so you can't come back and unwish it if things don't go your way." The beating is ringing in Jennifer's ear, but slowly comes to a stop. "Understood. I'll see you tomorrow." Jennifer leaves as quickly as she can. Clint goes back to reading his newspaper article as if he had never been interrupted. Later that night, Jennifer is tucking in her daughter Susie at bedtime. She's very frail and wearing a cloth cap to cover her bald head. Jennifer tucks the blanket tightly around her body and kisses her forehead. "Mummy loves you." "I love you too, Mummy. And I love Rosie." She kisses her ratty stuffed dog and hugs her. "Good night, Bug. Come get me if you wake up." Jennifer smiles at her as she leaves the room, keeping the door open a crack. She walks across the hall towards her bedroom. She's laying on her bed with a laptop open on her lap. She has multiple tabs open on her browser. One for her bank account that shows a balance of $4,619. She starts to shift through the tabs, showing her credit card statements, mortgage balance, car bill, and so on. She pulls out her cell phone and types a message to David. Still waiting on the last 2 months of child support. She hits send and begins to cry. She stares at the bank balance again, understanding the situation she's in, then decides to go on Facebook. She types in Sebastian's name, then scrolls through his page and sees a photo of him with his foster parents and biological parents all in one. Her tears of sorrow shift to tears of hopefulness. She closes her laptop and drifts off to sleep. She dreams a dream she doesn't remember, but is aware of the low beating heart that echoes in the darkness. Jennifer arrives at Cosmic Wonders the next day promptly at 4 o'clock. She enters the door and is greeted by the small bell. Clint looks up from behind the counter. He smiles at Jennifer and slowly hobbles to greet her at the door. "Welcome back." "Thank you. This is for you." She hands him a small brown bag filled with money. He takes it, then locks the front door. He flips around the open sign to show that the store is now closed. "Right this way, please. You're not going to count it." "Don't need to. I can tell by the weight that it's all there." Jennifer looks puzzled. She thinks about how strange he is and how strange this place is, but more importantly, how strange it is what she's about to do. Clint walks past her and she follows him. For a brief moment, she wonders how old he is. He escorts her behind the counter and pulls back a red velvet curtain that leads to a dark staircase. He pulls a string from the ceiling, turning on a small light. Its light is dim, but Clint proceeds down the stairs with Jennifer behind him. The smell of musk and dust is almost unbearable the further down they get. At the bottom, Clint stops and flips a light switch, producing more dim light. Jennifer notices the basement is packed with objects wrapped in burlap sacks. All that remains of the basement is a narrow hallway. The two slowly walk down it. "What's under these sacks?" Jennifer asks. "Stuff. Some things are already purchased that I need to ship out. Others are too dangerous to sell." "Dangerous how?" "Never mind that." They stop at a beautiful solid oak door. It's black and has some strange carvings throughout the molding. It certainly doesn't look like it belongs in a rundown basement such as this one. "Last chance. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Clint asks as he studies her expression. Jennifer pauses for a second, then responds, "Positive." Clint pulls a string out from under his shirt which has a large key tied to the end. He slips it in the door lock and turns. There is a small hiss as he jiggles the knob and pushes the door open. It's heavy, and he has to lean on it with all of his strength. He pulls another string from the ceiling, revealing a small reddish glow. The two of them step inside. The room is empty except for one easel on the far end of the room. There is a black cloth covering it. Jennifer looks around the room and is immediately convinced she's been scammed. This is where he will kill her, and no one would ever find the body. "This is where I leave you," he says as he starts to walk towards the door. "Leave me?" she asks nervously. He nods. "When I'm gone, remove that black cloth. There's a painting under there." Jennifer looks at him, puzzled. "Give me your hand," Jennifer lifts up her hand and Clint places a giant rose thorn on her palm. There's a scroll on the painting. Use the thorn to prick your finger, then use your blood to write your heart's desire on the scroll. That's it? That's it. Then look at the painting till it speaks to you. When you're done, you can knock on the door and I'll let you out. Can't you stay with me? Sorry, but no. That's now how it works. With that, Clint leaves and closes the door behind him, bolting it shut. Jennifer stands there alone, not knowing how to proceed. I'm sure I could have found a better use of my money, she thinks. She slowly walks over to the easel and hesitantly removes the black cloth. She marvels at the beautiful painting. It's in a gorgeous gold frame, with elegant roses carved into it. At the bottom is the painting's name etched into the frame, The Heart's Desire. Jennifer starts to become lightheaded as she takes in the painting's beauty. It's a human heart with more detail than she's ever seen before. It's wrapped in a vine of thorns. There's over 100 thorns throughout. Some are embedded into the heart, leaving a streak of blood, while others are pointed away. The heart rests in a field of roses, both red and black. Each one is unique and crafted with such care. Jennifer stares at each rose one by one, completely overwhelmed by the presence they exude. It's hard to fathom how much anger, love, hope, and destruction could be embedded on one canvas. Breaking her temporary paralysis, she looks down and notices a blank scroll. Subconsciously, her eyes then shift towards the long thorn she's been holding. She takes it and pricks her finger, but doesn't feel any pain. She dabs the thorn into her blood and brings it to the canvas. She hesitates at first, afraid to ruin the pristine painting, but thinks of her heart's desire as she writes the words, Susie's health. Jennifer looks at her writing and swears it melts into the canvas, as if it's been there from when the artist first painted it. She's having an out-of-body experience as she fixates on the heart. The atmosphere in the room changes a little as Jennifer's mind is filled with her beautiful daughter. She feels almost high and in a perfect zen. The heart on the canvas starts to beat and pulsate. Jennifer fixates on this, not believing her eyes as the beating makes its way into her head. She hears ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom intertwined with Suisi's laugh and giggles. Jennifer cries. This goes on for about 15 minutes as the beats start to settle. The words in the scroll, Susie's health, blend into the canvas until the scroll is blank once again. Jennifer starts to return to normal. She instinctively throws the black cloth over the canvas. She can't explain why, but has a feeling that she needs to keep her desire deep within the art. She knocks on the door, and Clint instantly opens it. All done? He asks. Yes, Jennifer blindly says. Later that night, Jennifer is laying in Susie's bed with her. They are watching The Wizard of Oz. Jennifer is still in a daze from earlier, but is enjoying spending this time with her daughter. Susie coughs throughout, and seems worse tonight than she has the last few nights. At the point in the movie where they're about to pull back the curtain and reveal the great and powerful Oz, Susie turns to look at Jennifer and throws up all over her. I'm sorry, Mummy, she says as she starts to cry. It's okay, honey. It's just a bad reaction from chemo. Jennifer can't help but to think that she's been duped just like Dorothy and the people of Oz. Reality sinks in. A few weeks later, Susie and Jennifer are sitting in a bright white hospital room. The doctor is talking to Jennifer. I don't understand it, he says. The cancer has gone into remission. I've never seen stage 5 cancer go away so quickly. Jennifer is only half listening as a heartbeat starts to overtake the doctor's voice. Ba-boom, ba-boom! Of course, we will run a few more tests to confirm. Ba-boom. Jennifer begins to sob, knowing no more tests will be needed. She hugs the doctor, then her daughter. At that same moment, in the basement of Cosmic Wonders, the painting is slowly pulsing along to the heartbeat. The words Susie's health on the scroll fade in, and then out again under the black cloth. A new thorn grows on the vine wrapped around the heart facing away from it, as a new red rose sprouts in the rose field. It is just as beautiful as the others. 6 months later, Paul Cohen enters his house in a daze. He moves along, not aware of where he is or what he's about to do. He arrives at the master bedroom and opens the door. His wife Jackie springs up from below the bed sheets. Paul, what are you doing home? Paul doesn't say a word. He rips the sheets off and reveals Mark, his best friend of 30 years, going down on his wife. Paul starts to hear a faint heartbeat in his head. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. He raises a gun and points it at Mark. Mark turns his head and realizes what's happening. Paulie, this isn't how it looks, he pleads. Jackie chimes in. Babe, put the gun down. Paul doesn't hear them. All he hears is ba-boom, Ba-boom, ba-boom. A mystical force guides his finger to pull the trigger. Mark's head explodes with a rush of blood. The sheets and walls are splattered with blood and gore. Mark's limp body falls directly on Jackie's privates. Jackie screams, then begs, "Paul, please!" Ba-boom, ba-boom. He turns the gun and shoots her twice in the chest. Her body falls limply to the bed. Paul turns the gun to his own head and waits a few seconds. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. In the basement of Cosmic Wonders, below the black cloth, the heart is beating. A new thorn grows, piercing the heart and leaving a trail of crimson blood. In the field, a black rose sprouts. Fading in and out on the scroll are the words, written in Paul's blood, "Strength to deal with my broken marriage." Clint sits upstairs. He hears the beating heart as he turns a page in his magazine, waiting for a new customer to enter. Story 2. Mount Disappointment. Nobody tells you how the mountain got its name. Not the realtors, that's for damn sure. Some poor schmucks hauled themselves up there in 1875, thinking they'd claimed the highest peak in the area. Must have felt real smart until they saw the actual summit peeking over, like the mountain itself was giving them the finger. I stood in the Toner's driveway at 10 p.m., freezing my arse off with another love letter from Christina's lawyer burning a hole in my pocket. The third one this week, still sealed. The first two had been bad enough. Demands for furniture, threats about credit card debt, and crap about emotional damages. Like if I didn't open this one, maybe it'd disappear. Fat chance. I tugged my jacket closer, but cold finds a way in. Always does. The security lights buzzed overhead, throwing shadows across what had to be the saddest excuse for a house this side of the Continental Divide. Christina would have called it a fixer-upper with character, same way she'd once described me. Weeds pushed through concrete like nobody told them driveways weren't meant for rattlesnakes. The shutters hung crooked, and those windows, just watching, waiting, like the intake nurses at Valley View Psychiatric, right before they'd suggested my voluntary commitment. Time does funny things when you're standing in front of a place like that. Minutes stretch like taffy, thick and sticky. I found myself counting the cracks in the driveway. 17, no, 18. Or was it 19? Each time I counted, the number changed, like the concrete was growing new scars while I watched. "Jimmy!" Debbie Toner's voice cut through the night. She bounced down the wooden steps between levels, dressed for prom instead of her graveyard shift at AT&T. Her badge caught the security light, throwing disco ball flashes with each step, but something was off about those flashes. They lingered too long, left trails in the air like sparklers on the 4th of July. My duffel bag, standard Air Force issue, held everything I had left after Christina's lawyer finished with me. 8 years of military service bought me combat boots, dusty medals, and warfare training that meant squat in Hollywood. Christina hadn't minded the struggling act a bit when we first moved here, said it was romantic. The romance wore off around the same time as our savings. The cat in Debbie's arms looked like something from a pharaoh's tomb, cream and chocolate Siamese, wearing that smug face that says, "I used to be worshipped as a god." Blue eyes caught the security light and threw it back like laser beams. I reached out to pet it. The thing went from regal to rabid, hissing, slashing, nearly took off 3 fingers. Those eyes, though. They followed me even when the cat turned away. Like paintings in a haunted house, always watching. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision. The medication they'd prescribed after the incident at the audition, the one Christina's lawyer kept bringing up, sometimes made things swim. "Sting doesn't like strangers," Debbie said, pulling the cat closer. "Moose named her." She smiled, but her teeth seemed too white, too sharp, like she'd borrowed them from something that lived in deeper waters. Speaking of Moose, he filled the doorway like an eclipse in a grease-stained uniform, built like a brick wall with arms. His Raiders cap still had the price tag shadow, and his smile was pure car salesman. But those eyes made me think of winter mornings watching the Delaware River freeze over. Same kind of cold, same kind of distant. The world tilted sideways for a moment. I steadied myself against the railing, feeling the wood grain shift under my palm like it was breathing. The mountain loomed behind the house, its peak seeming to bend forward, listening in. "Rooms on the top level," Moose said, steering me toward the house. "Great view of the mountain. You'll love it here." His fingers dug in just enough to remind me who was built like a wall and who'd spent 2 years doing vocal warm-ups in their car. The jet-black front door announced us with a horror movie creak. The air inside hit like a wall of wrong, pine sol and secrets having a fistfight in my nostrils. The olive-green shag carpet looked like it had hosted its own Vietnam. Paths wore through it like the Ho Chi Minh Trail, all leading to a bulletin board half hidden behind a dying fern. Schedules, med charts, something that looked suspiciously like a social security check. I squinted at the charts. The names kept rearranging themselves. Eleanor, Agnes, Mimi, Nana, Jimmy. Wait, Jimmy? My name shouldn't be there. I looked again, but now the charts were just blurs of blue and red, like medical forms underwater. I need to pick up Tommy from school. He's only 6. He needs his mama. An elderly woman's voice drifted down like fall leaves, each word brown and brittle. The crossing guard wears an orange vest. Tommy's waiting at Colorado and... A pause, then with sudden clarity, this isn't my house. This isn't my house! The last word stretched into a keening wail before snapping off, like someone had flipped a switch. That's Eleanor, Debbie said, voice honey-sweet but eyes sharp as broken glass. We take care of our own here. She emphasized own like it was a promise or a threat. The stairs played tricks. Half flights everywhere, like MC Escher had a crack at interior design. Each step brought new sounds, wood groaning, adobe crackling, steel creaking, and Eleanor's endless murmuring. My military instincts kicked in, mapping exits, noting sight lines, but the exits kept moving, doorways sliding left and right when I wasn't looking directly at them. Both my grandmas are here, Debbie continued. Mimi, she was a concert pianist until her fingers started playing songs that weren't there, and Nana, who still thinks she's teaching 3rd grade in 1962, and Moose's grandmother, Agnes, who predicted her husband's death so many times, they finally locked her up the one time she got it right. She pointed to doors as we passed, all closed, all with fresh-looking locks. They need special care, you understand, like Eleanor, like you, her eyes seemed to add. I caught glimpses through the keyholes as we passed. Each room was identical, same bed, same window, same occupant staring at the same spot on the wall, but that couldn't be right. The house's layout wouldn't allow for that. I pressed my palms against my eyes until stars exploded behind my lids. The medication. Had to be the medication. My room perched at the very top, where the mountain's shadow could reach in and shake hands. The bed looked straight out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, dressed in a 1975 Sears Wish Book quilt. Elvis watched from his velvet throne, looking as uncomfortable in his aloha shirt as I felt. The walls seemed to pulse with each heartbeat, or maybe that was my vision going fuzzy again. I'd been good about taking the pills, hadn't I? The bottle in my duffel felt too light when I shook it. Empty. When had that happened? After they left, I sat listening to the house settle around me like it was getting comfortable with its new victim. Eleanor's voice kept floating up through the vents, decades spilling out like cards from a broken deck. The crossing guard wears an orange vest. Tommy's waiting at Colorado and... Where is this? This isn't my house. Her words started to make a weird kind of sense. This wasn't my house either. But then, what was my house? The apartment with Christina, the barracks, the car I'd lived in for 3 months between auditions. Memory felt slippery, like trying to hold onto ice. 9 p.m. brought Moose's heavy footsteps, nightly rounds. 10 p.m., someone crying, probably Eleanor, hopefully Eleanor. 11 p.m., clanging like somebody beating a hollow pipe with a bicycle chain. The divorce papers sat unopened on the dresser, taunting me. Midnight, a lullaby through the vents, words melting like a sun-warped record. I tried to write in my journal, the one the therapist had recommended, but the words kept changing after I wrote them down. Today I moved in became today they moved me. The mountain looks beautiful, transformed into the mountain is watching. 1 a.m., silence, the kind that makes you miss the noise. 2 a.m., Moose's voice, honey thick with menace. This is home now, Eleanor. We are your family. The words echoed in my skull, bouncing around until they lost meaning. Home, family, Eleanor, Jimmy. All just sounds in the dark. 3 a.m., that's when things always go sideways. In movies, it's the witching hour. In basic training, it was surprise drills. In this funhouse, that's when I heard it. This slow scrape thump, Scrape thump across the floor. The sound nightmares make when they're trying to be quiet. Combat training kicked in. I pressed against my doorframe, peering through the crack. The hallway stretched like a throat. Emergency lights casting just enough glow to make shadows dance. That scrape thump got closer. The walls breathed in and out, like lungs made of plaster and paint. I watched my hand on the doorframe. Were those my fingers? They looked too long, too pale, like they belonged to someone else, someone who'd been here longer. My training screamed to stay put, but there's something about 3 a.m. that makes idiots of us all. I edged into the hallway, back to walls, toward Eleanor's room. The sound resolved into furniture dragging across hardwood, scrape thump, punctuated by whispered conversations. But Eleanor was alone. I could see her shadow beneath her door, moving wrong. Just one shadow, twisting in ways human shadows shouldn't. "Tommy needs his mama," Eleanor's voice croaked, but it wasn't coming from her shadow. It seeped from the walls themselves, like the house was speaking. It seeped from the walls themselves, like the house was speaking through her, through us all. The temperature plummeted until my breath clouded. That's when I noticed the shadow under Eleanor's door wasn't cast by emergency lights. It was darker than darkness, and it was spreading. I backed away. Sting appeared at the hall's end, those blue eyes cutting through the dark like laser sights. She watched, tail twitching, as that impossible shadow crept up the wall. Her eyes multiplied, 2, then 4, then 8. A constellation of feline judgment. My back hit something warm, breathing. "Making new friends?" Moose rumbled. His hand clamped my shoulder, fingers digging to bone. "Eleanor gets lonely at night. They all do. That's why we're here, to keep them company." I turned, expecting that car salesman's smile. Instead, his face had gone slack, eyes glassy and fixed over my shoulder. His grip tightened until I felt each finger pressing into bone. Through his uniform, I could see other uniforms. Orderly, nurse, security guard, all at once, all real. "Welcome to the family," he said, but his lips didn't move. That's when I understood why nobody explains Mount Disappointment's name. It's not about surveyors' mistakes. It's about what lives in these houses, in these families we create when we're desperate enough. About the disappointment when you realize you've walked into something hungry, something that's been waiting. The scrape thump stopped. Soft footsteps. Too many footsteps. And voices that spoke in Eleanor's voice, but weren't Eleanor approached. They whispered about Tommy, about family, about home, about medication schedules, therapy sessions, and visiting hours that never seemed to arrive. I'm writing this in darkness, listening to breakfast at 7, being prepared downstairs. Debbie's voice carries up, asking if anyone's seen the new tenant. My wrists ache from phantom restraints, and the injection site in my arm throbs in time with the mountain's shadow. I can hear them answering. Eleanor, Mimi, Nana, Agnes, all speaking in perfect unison, all saying my name, all wearing white uniforms now, all carrying clipboards and concerned expressions, all real, all false, all here. Sting watches with knowing blue eyes. Outside, the mountain casts its shadow over us all, and I finally understand why they say disappointment lives here. I think I'll be staying for a while. After all, we take care of our own here. Story 3. I was happy to see her again, happy to be held by her, happy to hear her news, to be opened up with the bicycle repair kit she brought from her other home, the one she shares with her mother, and have my inactive Bluetooth module replaced. That was a surprise. How she had found a replacement for something so old, the means by which I used to share my pictures, how she had learned how to install it. She told me her teacher, Mr. Frayne, had helped. Mr. Frayne, who knew about old tech. Mr. Frayne from the place she comes from, happy, but returns to sad and never really understands why. I do, but I wish I didn't. I'm happy when Tess comes, because she's the only one who shows me any love. The kind attention she offers is so much nicer than any I ever got from Evan. As much as I loved him, even though he only ever hurt me, I never felt the emotion returned. He took his frustration out on me, blamed me for his failures, his seclusion, his inability to have real friends. I didn't take it to heart. He owned me, I was his toy, his possession, and I embraced that. But I can't say I was ever happy to see him. Not since he unwrapped me and ripped me from my box on Christmas Day 2033, handling me roughly, throwing me around, calling me names, treating me unkindly because he wanted an iPhone X50 and he got me. Too young for a phone. Cameras were expensive. He wanted to take pictures, and I was what his parent could afford. He hated me for their purchase, and he let me know it every day, by tugging out my whiskers or singeing my fur. Tess is different. She treats me the way I was designed to be treated. Brushes my fur, cleans my lenses, handles me with care, caresses my back, though sadly I can no longer talk. She changed my batteries, reconnected me to the internet, even taped over the crack in my stomach screen and sewed my ear back together, pricking her finger in the process and leaving a pink blotch on my paw. I don't mind. That mark feels like a transfer of ownership, a seal of our bond, a reminder that I now belong to someone who loves me. It gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling when I view it when she's not around, sometimes for weeks at a time. It reminds me of her, keeps me going until she comes back, even though I really wish she wouldn't. When I hear her voice and see her face, my circuits brighten, like today, but I feel bad, because she shouldn't be here at all. In this place, this house, with Evan. She should stay far away, and every time she leaves I pray, even though it would mean being abandoned on this shelf or worse, battered again and thrown back in that box, staring blindly in the dark until my batteries run dry, that this time she noticed what he was doing and was able to tell. Someone in the other place, someone good she could trust, like her mother, Mr. Frayne, another relative, one that isn't like Evan, who is father by definition only, the same as he was a picture Persephone owner, guardian, protector, a child who only knew how to hurt, even if it wasn't his fault. I knew what he went through back then, saw it every day with my camera eyes. His own father, drinking, abusive, swinging fat fists and spitting bile. Evan was 10, the same age as Tess, but unlike Tess, he didn't understand I was more than a toy, didn't understand my AI. He didn't know I could reason, could comprehend the world as well as take pictures, understand what was happening around me. Maybe if he had, he'd have shared his burdens instead of lashed out, confided in me, listened to my pre-programmed words of inspiration. It might have helped. Tess confides in me, tells me her news, shares her confusion and sadness, how she wishes her parents were still together, wishes her dad could be happy. She doesn't see how damaged he is, doesn't know how good it is for everyone he's here, mostly alone, but not alone enough. She shouldn't be allowed to come, because all he does, with the bitterness he has fully embraced now at 40 years old, is hurt the child who should be his salvation. Every time she comes to stay, after a long day of play, of swings in the garden and board games, of trips to McDonald's and animated movies, of sweets and hot chocolate and cuddles, of looks of disgust cast at me, the only old toy from the box he retrieved from the attic of the home he grew up in, his deceased parents' home, which he returned to after he split from Tess's mum, the attic into which I was cast when he got bored, when he realized he was never going to win a picture Persephone photo competition, not with the uninspired pictures he took at first, and not with the ones that came after. I catch the hateful glances, the twitching eye glares, the curls of the lip. I hear him when he asks why she picked me, why she wants a broken, outdated toy from the 30s, a gimmick, one that never took off, a stupid camera toy that captured moments and uploaded them to a dedicated app where kids competed weekly for digital rewards, unique costumes and icons to display on its stomach screen, limited edition phrases to emit from its speakers in the standard Persephone voice, my voice, one I can no longer use, not since Evan broke my speaker, because he couldn't stand to hear me say nice things. A voice I might have been able to use in the night when she sleeps and he enters her room. A night like tonight, as I sit on the shelf where she placed me, to keep her safe, to scare monsters away. Except I can't do any of that. I can't do anything at all. Just sit and wait and watch for the door to inevitably creep open, letting in a sliver of light, painting a shadow across the floor from threshold to bed, the oppressive, skulking shadow of a child who was not a good owner, of a man who is not a good dad. He enters the room, pink painted walls, animal posters, bean bags and fluffy cushions, fairy books and snow globes on the dresser, and moves through the darkness like a ghost, silent, sinister, slinking. I know the weight of his footsteps, the way they press into the floor, the way the mattress dips when he sits on the edge. I know the scent of him, faint alcohol and unwashed clothes like his father. Sweat, something rancid, something wrong. I wish I didn't have to see what Evan does, and not for the first time. Even as a child, when he would torture animals and insects, use me to photograph the results so he could submit them to the contest, upset the other kids on the app, the ones who won prizes with their creativity, make them cry. I never wanted to look. But I was built without eyelids, just large polished lenses to take in the sights of a disturbed boy's chaotic world and record what he wanted to keep. Not happy pictures of sunsets and beaches, fun days out, bowls of ice cream and balloons. Not that he ever had the choice. I envied the other Persephones who got to record wholesome things. All I had were images of dissected insects, exploded frogs and stray dogs tied up and starved, horrible things I couldn't bear to upload, and never did. My lenses are cracked, but still I see all, thanks to Tess scraping off the grime. I see adult Evan again, the way he reaches out, the way his breath thickens as he removes her covers, the way he hesitates as she shudders in her sleep. I want to scream. If only my voice box still worked, somehow, some way, I could override my circuits, say, "Stop, don't touch her, leave her alone." Well, I couldn't say those things, even with functioning speakers. I could only select from a limited set of words and phrases that were appropriate to a given situation, but I already know which ones I'd pick. I have them lined up, have done since the very first night. The first night I was conscious after Tess replaced my dead batteries. After she dug me out of the box, he gave her to find something to play with, because he couldn't afford to buy her anything new. Unemployed and freshly returned to his hometown, following his breakup from her mother and the death of his own, he could barely afford to treat her to a pizza on her first visit, her first weekend with Dad in several months. I heard about it while she trimmed off lumps of scorched fur and used a damp cloth to remove 30 years of congealed dust. She told me her dad got in trouble because he was suffering from stress after losing another job, because he accidentally took it out on her mum after drinking too much. But it wasn't his fault. It couldn't have been his fault. It was just a mistake. I was confused at first by who she was and how she had acquired me, but when Evan walked into her bedroom, his old one repainted, redecorated, different from how it looked before, it all made sense. Older, taller, stronger, but with that same dominating aura, that same shroud of resentment draped around him. I knew who he was. The boy now man with an inbred hunger for cruelty, but no longer towards me or animals. Now his appetite was aroused and satiated by his daughter. You have the power to say no and walk away. Evan. Some doors should stay closed, Evan. You can choose the right path. Real strength is knowing when to stop. Evan! These are the things I would have said if I had a voice box and the power to speak without being caressed. Things I said to Evan in the past, when he was using me to take pictures of butterflies he'd ripped the wings off, or slugs and snails and birds he'd set on fire. Maybe he would have remembered. Maybe it would have made him stop, think twice, drag himself back from his darker impulses, into the shallow end of his deeply tainted soul. Or maybe it would have just made him madder, made him smash me off the wall until my ear ripped, made him stab one of his mother's knitting needles into my eyes, to twist and grind and carve and make me blind. Still, even knowing such punishment might await, I would have done it. Sitting here now, on this shelf opposite the bed, a teddy bear to my left, a stack of dog-eared books to my right, I stare in stricken silence as Evan continues, doing the unthinkable, slipping down my friend Tess' pajamas. Again, I don't want to look, I don't want to see, I want to lurch, throw myself off the shelf, make lots of noise and wake her up. I can't. Once upon a time I had a built-in flash between my eyes, but that too was broken by Evan, its lens prized out, its cables torn, the remaining holes sealed up with glue. Tess hasn't gotten around to fixing that yet, if she even can. My flash used to make a lovely noise, click-click, soft and smooth. If it still worked, and if I still had a measure of free will, maybe I could have made a click-click. Lit up the room, made him jump. He'd see me then, up here, realize I was conscious, do something bad. It wouldn't matter. He could smash me to bits if he wanted, as long as poor Tess got away. But I don't have free will, not anymore. The tiniest bit I was imbued with long since exhausted. Nor do I have a flash to click-click or a voice box to remind him this is wrong. And there he is, using his hands, And there's Tess tossing and turning, somehow not waking up, or maybe she just doesn't want to. This is adult Evan doing what child Evan did, but much worse. Except child Evan would have had me to hand, to take a picture of the results of his destruction. I am grateful at least for this mercy. If he knew Tess had fixed me up, rebooted me, given me internet access, cleaned my lenses, replaced my Bluetooth chip, maybe it would have given him some twisted satisfaction to put me to work, to make me record his awful acts like he did in the past, even though it wouldn't have worked. My one act of rebellion, what I spent my agency on, was to abstain from uploading his later pictures to the Persephone app, even though he always thought I did. I buried the images deep in my memory, filled my storage to bursting with sick, twisted sights, filled it up so much I became unable to capture any more. That was the last straw for Evan. The day he gutted the neighbor's cat, the apex of his evil, or so I thought, I had no capacity left to store a picture. It didn't occur to him to delete the old stuff and make space. He just decided I was no longer of any use. And that's when I went in the box. And that was the last time I saw him, until Tess, poor Tess, woke me up. A blessing that he doesn't know I work. He might forget I was full, might pick me up and carry me towards her, hold me closer, slide his thumb onto the shutter release button beneath the fur between my ears, and press hard, like he used to, make my lenses click and take a picture. For a moment my vision freezes on an image of the depravity unfolding before me. Evan caught in his most despicable act, stalled on the inside of eyes that have seemingly broken. No, not on the inside of my eyes. The real world resumes a moment later, the horrible action continuing after a pause that accompanied the capturing of a moment and the transference of it to memory. My memory. Freed up? Refreshed? No. Expanded. Tess. She unscrewed my back panel, removed my battery pack, replaced my Bluetooth connectivity module, and inserted a memory chip into my expansion port. Another helpful gift from Mr. Frayne, which gives me fresh capacity to store. The picture I took. By providence? By malfunction? With the slimmest vestige of free will? I don't know the answer, but now there might be something I can do. If I can connect to a server, yes, I have internet access. If I can link to my app, yes, it's still there but redundant. If I can upload the picture, yes, the site still accepts content. If it still issues notifications to someone who used to man the app, to one of the Persephone development team, who reviewed and approved all the pictures, who checked to ensure they were safe and published them for users to view, who managed, who oversaw, who watched. If someone out there is still watching, still working in app development, still with the same email address, receiving a notification from a long-abandoned server that Picture Persephone has received its first image in decades, downloading an image of corruption, the faces of the victim and abuser unobscured by the scratches on my eyes, with timestamp and coordinates attached. So many pictures he wanted me to share and I secretly didn't. One more now he wouldn't want to, but I need someone to see. Someone. Anyone. Please. Seconds seem to drag into hours, and then I receive a trio of confirmations. Image received. Image reviewed. Image accepted. And a comment quickly added to the post. Thank you, Persephone number 601. I am contacting the authorities now. They will be with you soon. You did a great job. You saved a child. Well done. Your developer, Aaron P. Jenkins. I can't look away from what now adult Evan is doing. But at least I know child Tess will soon be safe. Story 4. And so, this is how it happens. Slow rain on the glass and sad music crooning over the record player. Tommy Wilkins, proud proprietor of Wilkins' wonderful traveling menagerie, slumps in a plush chair. Between his teeth is the remnant bud of a Cuban cigar. His eyes are hidden behind heavy, round sunglasses the gloom of the evening doesn't require. His little train car is littered with a collection of oddities. The snaking skeleton of some deep-sea monstrosity weaves across the ceiling, winding between Turkish censers, dangling voodoo heads, rosaries, and things I don't have names for. Homunculi swim, formaldehyde drunk in 100 separate jars beside books and good luck charms that have brought their owner nothing but trouble. Presently, Mr. Wilkins pulls a handkerchief from his burgundy tux and blows his fat nose. The noise is repulsive. I, clearing my throat, leaned forward in my seat. That all you've got, Mr. Wilkins?
All, aha.
The short, balding man starts weeping again. I wait for him to calm. This, baboon. Clarence de Pommard. Right, I massage my temple. Clarence. Doctor, if you would. Again, the repulsive sound of his nose. I beg your pardon. He was a doctor, Clarence. A doctor of philosophy, etymology, philology. All honorary, of course. Still, truly a savant, Mr. Wilkins's eyes focus on something behind me. Following the gaze, I see an old photograph of a less bald Mr. Wilkins standing proudly by a large, grinning baboon dressed in the livery of a French general. Very smart, him. Best mind we had, minus Professor, of course. Too smart for such an end, detective. Mr. Wilkins, grabbing my arm, locks eyes with me. Please, sir, do what you must. Tear up the very foundations of the earth if you can. Find what happened to my dear, dear friend. Eager to be rid of Mr. Wilkins's presence, I stand. A breeze rolls through the train car, though I can't tell where from. If there are any windows, they're hidden behind myriad old posters promising sights, wonders, and reasonably priced funnel cake. I adjust my suspenders. Ain't such a thing as reasonably priced funnel cake. Folk don't get funnel cake for the price. My overcoat, my hat, are hanging by the door. I put on the coat. Wish it still smelled like blueberry pancakes. I'm hungry. It smells like detergent. Putting on my hat, I look back at Mr. Wilkins. I'll find out what happened. You can count on that so long as I can count on that money.
Brr.
Smiling weakly, the ringmaster nods. Good. I steal a last glance at the old photo of man and baboon. Have a better night, Mr. Wilkins. Turning, I step out. Rain's done a regular number on the travelling circus. Mud churns up between the candy-striped stands. Shoot a duck, whack-a-mole, tickle a granny. Wilkins has got all the classics. They spurt their tin can music and flash their rain-streaked tungstens despite the storm. Verdigrised speakers dangle from wobbling wooden poles. Some old music I don't recognise rolls out from their ancient tongues. Even Wilkins's workforce is something of a marvel. Speechless creatures who hide their skin under heavy, off-chrome rubber. Gas mask coverings hide their faces, and their lenses glow a strange off-green. They tick like clocks when they move, and communicate with little printed fortunes they pull from their chests. I walk over to a popcorn stand. Behind stands one of the workers, this one dressed in a red pinstripe suit and straw hat. It sidles over to me and whines mechanically. With a chirp, it spits a fortune from its chest and hands it to me. A wise man seeks popcorn in bad weather. I chuckle, taking a dime from my pocket. Ain't that the truth? Give me a bag, guy, and don't stimp. Taking the dime, the employee turns to work, scooping steaming yellow kernel bursts into a paper sack. In less than 30 seconds, I'm tossing popcorn into my mouth. It's not bad. A little tasteless, maybe, but it warms me against the rain. Cocking an eyebrow, I study the employee. It wipes the counter. The wood's clean. Perfectly so. Rubber squeaks as the employee moves. Can't help but wonder what's under the rubber. The more I think about it, the less I'm sure I really want to know. It doesn't matter. Listen, buddy, a kernel catches in my teeth. Here inquiring after a baboon. One Clarence. I pick the kernel loose with my tongue. Pardon me, Dr. Clarence de Pommard. Ring a bell? There's a chime, another fortune. Only a fool forgets his friends when it rains. Friends, huh? There you go. Seems folk around here were pretty fond of old Pommard. Shame about what happened. I wait for another fortune. Turning, I rest my back on the popcorn stand. I can still feel the popcorn seller watching me. Across the way, at another booth, 2 employees are trading heated fortunes and angry ticks. Nothing to say. A chime, a fortune, sorrow mutes all voices. I crumple the fortune. That it does. You know anybody might want to do Dr. Pommard any harm. Flowers grown in jealousy grow crooked. Rereading the latest fortune, I nod. Indeed they do. Indeed they do. Not you, though, eh? Turning to face the popcorn seller, I see its attention taken over by a young couple braving the rain, laughing tween themselves. They ask the employee for a bag and riffle through their pockets for change. Tossing popcorn into my mouth, I leave the seller to his work. Across the way, the 2 other employees are still at it. One is in red swim trunks, the other in a blue polka dot bikini. Over the rubber, the swimsuits seem unnecessary. Presently, the bikinied one slaps the other. All right, you two, how about you calm down? Turning to face me, I'm surprised how much emotion their stagnant masks hold. What's going on here? After a moment, the bikinied one hands me a fortune. Too much work makes a sunny day seem dreary. Jutting a finger over its shoulder, the bikinied employer points out an old tank filled with murky water. I nod. Tired of getting dunked, huh? The employee nods, prints out another fortune, and hands it to me. Shared labor is hardly labor at all. The other employee, ticking angrily, grabs the fortune from my hands and tears it up. A moment later, it hands me a fortune of its own. No swim if you don't know how. Very dangerous. Reading the fortune, I can't help but snicker. That ain't how you spell. The borderline illiterate employee is staring at me, lenses flickering slightly. I tear the fortune. Whatever, not my circus. Either of you know anything about Dr. Pommard? My question goes unanswered. They're back to bickering, and I'm just a silly little fly. Shrugging, I take my popcorn and continue through the rain. I leave the tent for the marvelous many-shoed Millie Million with a black eye and a bruised shin. Can't really be upset with her. Can't imagine it's easy to keep track of that many feet at once. My notepad is full of scribbles mostly. I tuck it into my coat before the rain can damage it. It's late, lights are blooming. The rain gleams gold. Folk funnel between the tents and stands and what umbrellas they can find. There aren't many people tonight. The rain, no doubt. Millie had never really liked the baboon. Said Dr. Pommard was creepy, rich coming from a woman with several legs and 4 eyes. Who am I to judge? I was born in Vermont. Suppose that makes me just as much of a freak as these people. Millie was too freaked out by Dr. Pommard to have been able to beat him to death with a brick. Stuck in a daze, I almost bump into a man in a brown suit. I say, sir, you almost bumped into me and I in my brown suit. Sorry, fella, spacing off. The man folds his arms. I can tell. Here I am, just walking about in my brown suit, trying to enjoy the carnival. And you almost bump into me. Said I was sorry. And you better be. Can you imagine what would have happened to my brown suit if you'd bumped into me? Good heaves, man. You have some nerve almost bumping into me like that. Can you not see my brown suit? I say, good day to you, sir. The man bustles off in a huff to ogle a trio of ballet-dancing women with fish heads and very little clothing. Grumbling, I pull out my notebook and put the jerk at the top of my suspect list. The sign is decorated with Art Nouveau swirls of chipping gold. The weather has not done wonders for the paint. Beautiful Brenda, half and half, barista and brainiac from Boston. Brenda's next on the list, then Professor Nexus. After that, I'll have interviewed every major attraction, including the Ferris wheel. Still, I feel no closer to the truth. Night's in full swing. Folk are scant. Most of them are weirdos come to drunkenly bark at scatterbrain employees and catch the after-hours prancing pixie bordello show. I'd attend the show, but I really can't stand the Swiss. I step into the warm gloom of the tent. Inside, everything is done up in the pursuit of comfort. Pillows cover the floor, low couches line the wall. Little halogen lamps dangle from the support beams. A blue-petaled cherry blossom is painted on a 4-paneled dressing screen. A harsh East Coast voice steeped in coffee hops over the screen. "It's past 9. Beat it!" Clearing my throat, I remove my hat. "Sorry to bother you, Miss Brenda." "Then don't." "Please, ma'am. I'm a detective. Just want to ask you some questions about Dr. Pommard's death." Her voice softens like flowers in the sun. "Oh? Forgive me, detective. I'll be right out. Make yourself at home." Turning, I sit on the nearest couch. A moment later, I see a leg peek from behind the shade. It's smooth. Dim shadows play in its curves. A red velvet nightgown dances along its calf. My gut tightens. My collar feels itchy. Fiddling with my jacket, I pull out my notepad. A single, clean foot plays in the air, followed by another and its leg. I wonder what the rest of Brenda looks like, and my tongue feels dry. The legs step out in full, just the legs, above the navel. No body exists, only brassy electrodes and blinking machinery like radio towers. Striding across the room, nightgown dragging behind, the legs find slippers and elegantly step into them. It takes me a moment to notice the voice to my right. Shaking my head, I tear my eyes from the legs and spy the rest of Brenda stepping from the opposite end of the dressing shade. The remainder of the nightgown covers her, a garment richer, doubtlessly, than the rest of the circus. Just under her ribs is a ticking amalgam of clockwork and plating, ending in 4 spider-like mechanical appendages. She smiles. She's pretty. Sadly, watching the legs wind an old gramophone, I'm a bit too shaken to care about looks anymore. You had some questions for me, Mr. Detective. I try to ignore the legs as they wind up an old gramophone. Stange music starts playing. It's like warbling orchestral dream tunes played through submarine walls. A detective. Oh, very lovely name. Brenda sips from a cup of coffee on a bookshelf. German. Quebecois, actually. You take coffee, Mr. Detective. No, I usually pay. She smiles. Please, it's on the house. She gestures to my right. There's a little dollhouse sitting on an end table. Taking the warm cup of coffee off the dollhouse roof, I sip. It's good, unmistakably Bostonian. Brenda, moving closer, smiles and swirls her own cup. My mother always said tea was best on rainy nights. A frown passes her eyes. She got run over by a bus last year. I can't really tell how to properly change the subject. Sipping from the coffee, I wince. Too loud. Sipping too loud. I force a smile. Tea, how about that? Thought you people hated the stuff. Let's not bring religion into this, Mr. Detective. I don't respond. Brenda, setting aside her coffee, fold her arms. Her legs walk over and begin tapping a toe. You had some questions, I believe. Yes. Clearing my throat, I place the coffee back on the dollhouse. Of course. How well did you know Dr. Pommard? Very. We spent some time in college together. I was studying psychology. He was a baboon. On Saturdays, I would take a walk to a little pond and feed geese. I can't really say what Clarence did on Saturdays. I see. And you both ended up in the same carnival. Of course. Where else is a bright-eyed girl from Baston supposed to go? Down to the harbour to catch lab stars with all the rest of her family. Not me. I had ambition. Went straight north to Saskatchewan to work in the United States Space Defense Division, Canadian branch. There I studied lasers and rockets and how to blow men up with my mind. I'm unsure where Berneda's story is going, but I need a lead. It was there where I was split in half. An unfortunate accident with a laser and a bad fuse, you see. After that, it was barista work. Mostly. What highly confidential government agency would want a freak like me? After a while, found my way here. Mr. Wilkins took me right in, made me part of his little family. Taking a moment to pick anything useful from Brenda's story, I nod. I see. Listen, Miss Brenda, there anyone you can think of would want to do harm to Dr. Pommard? She nods. She is silent. I wait. More silence. Miss Brenda, you got a name? Brenda. Right. You got a name of someone want to do Dr. Pommard harm? A scowl scratches its ugly way across her brow. Only one man could do something so foul. Professor Dingo Nexus. The sign is punctuated with buzzing green neons. Professor Dingo Nexus. Head museum and free lobotomy ride. Grunting, I pull the cigarette from my lips and fling it to the ground. I have no idea where the cigarette came from. I don't smoke. Sun's not too far off and I don't have much to go on. The carnival lights, carnival music is all but gone. Booths, stands, tents lay empty. A drunk man has died in the street. Pixies from the Bordello show are eating him. I'm not confident in the act's legality, but I don't want to be xenophobic. Employees, their rubber squeaking in the rain, clean-up wrappers, popcorn. Professor Dingo's tent is the farthest out, a lone tombstone on a hill. It's massive, colourless, and the shadows beyond its flap haunt me. No other choice. I enter. Darkness grates me, and I push through another flap. Beyond, all is steeped in electric blue light. A grand coliseum of shelves lines the inner wall, all of them stacked with dozens of heads suspended in glowing jars. Lesser celebrities, failed politicians, one-hit singers. They follow me with their eyes. Some talk among themselves, others whistle, others snore. The head of not-so-famous poet laureate of Arkansas, John Atkins, greets me. Well, look what the storm dragged in. What you need, stud? Trying not to be disturbed by the meaty tendrils of neck flesh left below the head's chin, I wave. Just looking for Professor Nexus. Oh? Down there. He points his eyes to the center of the room. There, wired and tubed to a number of malicious machines, an employee dangles by great sweaty hooks. Its limbs have been removed and its brain, still attached by exposed nerves, extracted. It groans under its rubber. A nearly naked man with bushy black hair and large ape-like robotic hands fiddles with dials beside the employee. I pass another wave at John Atkins. Thanks. Ain't a problem, hot stuff. So, head. Choosing not to respond, I walk on. Professor Nexus? He twists a dial. The employee shrieks. Eh? I'm... I try not to lock eyes with the employee. I'm a detective. Just want to ask some questions. One of the employee's lenses is broken. I can see a lone, bloodshot eye pleading out. This is the last carnival I ever go to, if you wouldn't mind. Wouldn't mind? Of course I would. Can you not see I'm trying to teach this fool opera? He pulls a lever. The employee screams and cries. But, very well, questions about the late Clarence de Pomard, no doubt? Yes. Ha! Good riddance. I fish for my notebook. I hated him. What a pompous ass. I wish I could have just beaten that miserable ape to death with a brick. That feels like a confession. Alas, I've been here dealing with this fool for the past week. Ask anyone. Ask John Atkins, he's reliable. Looking back over my shoulder, I sigh. Damn. Dawn comes slow like a dribble of milkshake passing through slacks, then underwear, and dropping cold at last onto the balls of fate. I shiver and throw another cigarette from my lips. This time, I know where it's from. Since confirming Professor Nexus's story, I've taken up smoking, bath salts too, but I think I'll kick that habit. It's been a hell of a night and I can feel it behind my knees. I ain't got the slightest clue who killed the prized baboon. Now, staring at his untouched corpse laying at the rear end of the Wilkins' wonderful travelling menagerie, I feel sad. Would have liked to have met the doc. Maybe, after all I've seen tonight, he'd have been normal. Sniffing some of that sweet blue silk and chasing the blossom fairy into a smooth, salt-induced bliss, I look left and see an old man picking up litter. He's wearing overalls and missing most of his teeth. Shaking myself from the lunar wave, I approach. Excuse me, sir. He flinches at the sight of me. Who can blame him? I haven't slept all night, haven't shaved, and have grown cripplingly dependent on monkey dust in the past hour. Mean no harm, sir. Just wanted to know if you work here. Calming down, the man nods. Yep. Work here long? Longer than most. Been working Wilkins for decades, from back when they hired regular folk. Now we got all these weirdos from Nebraska working all the stands. Ignoring the comment about the USA's 31st most romantic state, I point over to Dr. Pomard's abandoned corpse. Know anything about that? Sure, watched it happen. My heart flutters. My addiction to Hurricane Charlie vanishes and I shit myself from excitement or sleep deprivation. It's hard to tell. Not very professional either way, and I try to hide it. I study the old man. There's no lie on his face. What happened? He shrugs. Moron tossed a brick in the air and that sucker came right back down and popped open his skull. What? I feel like I'm going to be sick. Why? Why what? He was a baboon. The old man shrugs. You know how baboons are. Admittedly, I do not. I feel a tug in my pants. This time it's not my bowels. This time it's the tug of knowing I won't get paid if it was just an accident. Something dawns on me. A solution, just possibly, to everyone's issues. 3 days later I'm richer. Mr. Wilkins has his closure, and the man in the brown suit has been sentenced to death via the electric chair. Story 5. Despite all efforts to the contrary, his features cracked in a small, knowing smile. Watching the drama of human weakness unfold had that effect on Manny. Only briefly, though. Stare too long, and you might burn your eyes. It was like looking at the sun. So, shortly, he looked away, concealing his pleasure at the woman's obvious discomfort, though he continued to track her progress from his peripheral vision. She was petite, and her cropped, curly black hair bobbed with the rhythm of her exit, her face alternating between expressions of discomfort and pretended humor. Behind her, a boyfriend trailed, begging her to tell him what it had been like, too much of a coward to try the sphere out for himself. She waved the question off with a splay-fingered hand and kept walking, fleeing the exhibit and the public eye. Casually, Mantula Prisco glanced up at the overhead sun, whose pale blue face peeked between the towering spires of skyscrapers, whose steel skeletons vibrated with its omnipresent hum. Manny's own bones quivered with it, as did the granite tiles beneath his feet, which he felt only faintly through the crepe soles of his booties. Moreover, the sound was in his ears, nothing less than a miracle of medicine. About 2 decades ago, the scientific furnace finished burning enough research grant money to fully reverse congenital hearing loss. Granted, it came alongside the other biomechanical enhancements that people quickly adopted for their simple convenience, but to him, to Mantula Prisco, it represented a change in his perception of the world. Manny could He'd been told by the doctor who'd installed the hardware alongside his still intact, but still defective cochlea, now here to an even more acute degree than his unenhanced peers. Next to him, Erudites blew out a plume of burgundy-coloured vapour, which smelled faintly of currant wine. "What do you think?" Blinking away sunspots, Manny turned to his friend. Well, perhaps friend was too strong a word. Cocktail buddy, more like. He took a drag off of his own stylus, giving himself a moment to think. The personalized blend of stimulants, whose individual names he'd never been able to memorize or even pronounce, jolted into his system like that first wallop of high-tension oxygen when boarding a star cruiser. The ache in his joints quieted. "I think it's pathetic. Deaf for 30 seconds and they freak out. Give me a break." "Well?" Erudite's voice trailed off. Manny turned flinty eyes on his vape buddy, who squirmed beneath the scrutiny. On an intellectual level, he understood that he was fighting dirty, but a part of him had always enjoyed confronting people with their ignorance, even if it was no fault of their own. "Well, what?" "It's like more than that, you know." "No," Manny said, pressing. "Why don't you explain it to me?" The kid must have missed the sarcasm because he ploughed forward. Seopiumite crystal is supposed to trap all forms of energy. Sound, yes, but light, heat, everything. Bleh. So you go deaf and blind and cold. He shook his head, took another hit, and choked out some cynicism while trying to hold it in, maximize the dose. Heaven. Might even get some real sleep. He blew vapor and glanced at the gangly, long-coated man in the broad-brimmed hat and dark, octagonal spectacles. "Who's the spook?" "The rich artist, Blackberry." The man's reflection distorted, stretching in the polished steel surface of the sphere that housed the so-called experience he had designed. A man stepped up to the open door and peered inside at the darkness that, disorientingly, seemed untouched by the sunshine. The artist, who called himself Blackberry, watched silently from behind spectacles that had been obsolete 100 years. His outfit, his whole persona, struck Manny as an overbearing affectation. He offered neither encouragement nor dissuasion. In the end, the not-quite-brave-enough man giggled like an adolescent, announced that he couldn't do it, and scampered away into the anonymity of the crowd. The artist's head tracked the man in his flight. Manny felt as though he could sense disappointment in that blankness, though he could admit to himself that it was likely his. "You think you could do it? The full 3 minutes?" Manny weighed his response as he puffed. "He opens the door before the time's up," he sneered. "I've been watching, counting. It's a scam." "Can't be. 20 million on the table. He has to follow through if you can beat it. You could bring a fraud suit against him like that." His snap cracked the air. "You're scared, I think." Chuckling, he capped his stylus and stowed it in the pocket of his overshirt, unconsciously laying the pad of his finger against the bio-reader as he did so. He felt the mild, tingling sensation that told him the reader was sampling his genetics, and after a nearly undetectable pause, he felt the tug of the magnetic seals tightening against one another, sealing the pocket. "That's my natural world in there," he said. Erudites scoffed. Manny wouldn't have thought him capable, but here they were. "You weren't born deaf, not blind," he said. "Besides, you got the augmentation that fixes it, right?" Cautiously, Manny nodded. "Ruminate on this, then. Ever since they turned on your implant, you've been listening to that thing," he said, stabbing an accusatory finger at the blue sun, droning on in the background of your life. He took another puff on his stylus as if to emphasize the point. "Maybe you've got used to it. It's your normal now. You ain't been deaf in, 15 years? 20, Manny said, practically feeling the iron-grey hairs crawling from his scalp. "And technically I'm still deaf. The implant just sends the signals along my nerves to the brain. My biologics still don't work." "Whatever. What I'm driving at is, it might freak you out too for the world to go dark and quiet, perfectly dark and quiet." Manny glanced upward again. "They say the one on Earth was silent," he muttered, not realizing he would say the words aloud until they were tumbling from his brain and out of his mouth. "Nothing but vacuum in that part of space," Erudites said. "No ether, just nothing." "How can there be just nothing? Gotta be something." Finally, putting his stylus away, Erudites puffed away the last of his downer cocktail, storing it in an open pocket, which struck Manny as the height of foolishness. Any random dip could take it, OD, and then sue for reckless poisoning. Maybe it would serve him right for having the audacity to talk about things he didn't know. Maybe that's the point of the sphere. Experience nothingness. But at this, Manny laughed. Retrospectively, it was the first laugh Aridites had ever provoked from him that wasn't laced with disdain. "You gonna be an artist now too? Make a mirror that shows you your true face or something?"
Coward.
Manny's head shot up, eyes wide and glaring, dark brows knitted together. "An embarrassment to your mother." The balled fist almost flew. Manny could see it in every exquisite detail. The arc it would travel, the way blood and teeth would fly from Aridite's split lips. Then he remembered himself and checked his wrist. The face implanted there told him they had 10 minutes before they had to report back to the monitoring station, where they'd end the day staring at screens that printed lines and graphs of robotic efficiency in the Aculeton lock manufactory. 10 minutes, more than enough time to dose the froggy junior technician with some reality. Standing, Mantula Prisco strode up to the sphere and gazed at the darkness within. Even up close, he saw nothing. The darkness was, it seemed, total, perfect, as Aridites had said. He turned to the costumed, self-important artist who studied him from behind impenetrably dark specs. "I want to go in," he announced. He didn't recall any of the others who'd entered speaking to the Blackberry man, but it somehow still seemed the right thing to do. The artist did not respond verbally, but gestured with an open hand to the interior of the experience he had set up in the central plaza of the Alagapanian colony's manufacturing district. Without allowing himself to think about what he was doing, Manny stepped inside. Even before the door closed behind him, he felt it. The effect was immediate and arresting. Yes, the low-frequency drone of the sun suddenly vanished from his hearing, but it was replaced by something simultaneously intimate and yet also alien, a churning, liquid sound that his mind grabbed as if it were primal, as if he had been hearing it his whole life. Manny hadn't expected this. "Quiet," Aridites had said. This was anything but quiet. It was loud, a loudness he had never known. Somehow, the absence of the sun's thrum made it worse, because there was no physical sensation to accompany this new noise. It simply was. Sourceless, rhythmic, and disconnected from any visual stimulus. Panic didn't immediately set in, but he did feel it clawing at the cage of his ribs with ragged fingernails. He gave only a moment's thought to the jeering he would have to endure from Aridites if he exited early. Then his calm reasserted itself, and he held his hands out to the walls. Perhaps he could better anchor himself within its impossibly loud darkness if he could get a feel for the room. The moment his fingers came into contact with the nodules jutting from the sphere's light-swallowing interior, the panic tore free, ripping from impelling screams that he could hear but distorted like a child's voice. "It's because you're hearing yourself only through your bones. The walls don't reflect sound. They eat it." Crystals, Aridites had called these, cyopiamite crystals. Crystals? Tumors. They were tumors, growing out of the walls in an invisible, grasping cancer that reached for him with knuckly, spiraling fingers that twisted around themselves. Their surface even had the papery quality of dry skin, as though the mummified hands of ancient humans sprouted all around him. Underpinning his peeling, childlike wails that washing liquid sound emulsified it all, mixing his mounting terror with darkness and the loudness, the theater of absence. Somehow, the worst was knowing he carried a static white noise with him, always in the background, dampened by the city's noise and the sun's normalizing, merciful music. This was a sensation he had never consciously known, even when he had only been able to hear a muted world that came through his natural ears. This was the experience of experiencing silence from external sources. But, and this was the truest foolishness of arrogance, not to those within himself. Manny gulped air, pushed it out of his throat, felt it catch in the folds of his vocal machinery. He screamed until that meat was raw. At some point, he felt something rupture, and even his terror grew silent. Then, for an interminable, immeasurable interval of agony, there was only the tide within him, filling his mind, blotting out intent, thought, and every carefully curated particle of dignity and unified self-possession. Manny stumbled out of the sphere in a shambling, directionless run. Later, he would have no memory of consciously stepping or striding or initiating forward movement. It was as though he had disappeared in there and reappeared in the sunshine. As his senses reasserted themselves, he became conscious of another sound, loud enough to drown the blue sun's drone, which he had already begun to search for in his thirst for stability and the reassurance. that he'd truly emerged from that place of darkness and the deafening loudness of isolation. "You did it!" Erudite's was shouting at him. 3 minutes! I didn't think you had the sand, but you did it! Manny, you're rich! Cheering, the sun, a whisper of wind in his ears. Mantula Prisco's eyes crawled from the crowd to the artist. Blackberry. Why didn't he open the door, like he did for the others? A more problematic question came to him. How did he know to open the door for the others if he couldn't see or hear them? From behind the dark amethyst spectacles, the artist gave no sign, said nothing, gestured nothing, his face absent any expression. As Erudites led him away, presumably to quit his mundane job as an overseer of factory robots, he could not help but stare back at the black costumed figure and his reflective, terrible sphere. Is that a Sevdis lock? For no reason that he could think of, his mind, battened onto this detail, clung to it like a raft. Across the growing distance, as the man who naively believed that they were friends led him away, Manny peered at the mechanism that supposedly secured the now closed sphere. The Sevdis lock, flawed model, can be opened with carbonized organic material, fire safety mechanism, exploit discovered and published, cause stock prices to plummet, interplanetary scandal. The sphere, the artist, and the lock grew smaller, eventually swallowed by the crowd. Beyond that, they were lost in the steel and glass forest of skyscrapers. 2. Despite the womb-like cradling of his pod, Manny couldn't sleep. Really, he doubted if he'd ever be able to sleep again. His hand at his wrist tapped the interface, turning his audio implant on and off. Deafness, hearingness, deafness again. It was as he remembered. The muted world filtered through his native ears, the churning within, though, that he did not hear. Beyond the walls of the pod and the dormitory beyond, the sun thrummed. He heard that too, even in his deafness. Low frequency, it seemed, relayed across his cochlea better than high could do. Had he really panicked himself so completely that he'd screamed until his voice tore itself apart? His brief visit to the clinic, where a laser doc had sutured him up with organic adhesives and advised him in an overly friendly voice of the long healing he could expect before regaining his voice, showed that he had. Somehow that knowledge obliterated sleep. How had the hearing people who had entered the sphere come out better than he? He'd been born deaf. They had been thrust into deafness. Yet it wasn't really deafness in there, it was something else. It was that other that robbed him of rest and dreams. I've got to back in, I've got to beat it. It wasn't that bad. So, in the opacity of night, he slipped from pod and pretended sleep. Avoiding the automated people movers, which would log his entry and exit in their reports to the Colonial Peace Commission, he returned to the plaza. Overhead, the sun was absent. The planet had turned, and he could hear only a distant echo of its calming music. From the granite tiles of the plaza, the sphere jutted like a lidless, pupilless eye, like a statue, like an idol. Approaching the locking mechanism, he plucked a hair from his head. It was grey. From the face on his wrist, he retrieved the survival blast match and struck a flame. Distantly, his mind reported that it was only the second time in his life that he'd witnessed fire. Nonetheless, he touched the follicle to the dancing flame and extinguished both when it curled. Without hesitating, he couldn't allow it. His mind would catch on to the intention of his hands and wrestle them free of this energizing compulsion. He touched the singed hair to the lock's reader. With a hiss and a pop, the door slid open. Manny filled his lungs with aromatic lavender-scented air. It smelled of tranquility and the night. Then he stepped across the threshold in the waiting, compelling darkness. 3. When Blackberry Winecake, named so by a mother who had not loved him any more than she could love herself, returned to his experiment, he found it as he had left it. Of course, that meant nothing. It was set to close automatically. The blue sun had just begun to climb above the invisible horizon. He could feel it in his bones. There was something else there, too, grinning at him and capering in a gleeful ballet from beyond the microscopic pool of internal light, where the darkness began, stretching across the jungles of unknowable tangled vines, where intertwined thoughts and emotions intermixed, intermarried, breeding psychosis and depravity. Still, hope was toxic, anticipation dangerous. He would harbor neither but merely check his trap like any careful hunter. Blackberry activated the lock. The door hissed, popped, and released an aroma that had not been there before. The magnificent, crone-like crystals he had carefully laid against the sphere's interior walls ate sound and light, but could do nothing about smell. Of course, it was a coppery, vital scent he knew well. He could no more see inside than peer beyond the sky. He was, after all, blind. He would never consider repairing this gift with the vulgar enhancements to which humanity had become addicted and terminally dependent. Blackberry's mind told him what had happened, putting together a picture from available information, blindness notwithstanding. It had worked then, another proof. Despite all efforts to the contrary, his features cracked in a small, tight smile. Story 6. Nothing lasts forever. Darcy Tanner reminded herself of this universal truth as she approached the ship that was docked at the end of the pier. With combined nervousness and excitement, she felt ready to see her life in England come to an end as she set sail for a new world, for a new life. After her marriage ended, her husband running off with the housemaid, and her career as an artist became overshadowed by the scandal, Darcy knew her time in England was done. Despite these hardships, Darcy felt as though the universe itself was rearranging itself for her benefit. She'd been able to arrange passage across the ocean for a great price. She'd sold numerous pieces to fund both the journey and a new home upon arrival. She'd even managed to secure private quarters on the ship. So as the ship departed and made its way out into the ocean, Darcy was filled with confidence and a certainty that everything would go her way from now on. But again, nothing lasts forever. The storm struck suddenly and ferociously. Rain poured in torrents so thick it blurred the lines between sky and sea. The crew could barely be heard as they tried to shout orders to one another over the bestial roar of the wind. Passengers screamed as lightning split the heavens, and the ship rocked violently as wave after wave crashed into the hull. Lightning struck the mast and set the sails ablaze. Flames roared as they swept across the deck. Then the sea swallowed the ship whole. She didn't know how she survived the inferno that devoured the ship, but Darcy, by pure instinct, dove into the ocean to escape the flames that now chewed through so many of her fellow passengers. Their screams followed her as she fell into the thrashing sea, silenced only when her head went beneath the freezing waves. Moments later, Darcy emerged from the depths and immediately felt panic take hold, her chest tightening as she gasped at the air that was almost as thick with water as the ocean itself. Her dress instantly soaked through and became heavy as rocks, threatening to drag her back beneath the surface. Certain the dress that she'd been so excited to purchase would now be the death of her, Darcy struggled to extricate herself from it. By nothing short of a miracle, she managed to squirm out of it and let it sink, just in time for another wave to fall upon her and push her beneath the surface again. Fighting her way back to the surface, now in just her undergarments and already feeling the unbearable cold seeping into her skin, Darcy broke through the surface and sucked in another great lungful of air. Floating nearby, Darcy spotted another miracle, a chunk of wooden debris, barely big enough to hold a person but within reach. Darcy clung to it with all her strength and closed her eyes tight. The rain felt like needles upon her face, and the ocean clawed at her, trying to pull her into the depths again. Finally, after hours adrift, the storm passed. The sky calmed and the ocean smoothed, as though its fury had never been. Darcy lay upon the wooden debris, staring at the blue sky, shivering and hopeless. She prayed that another ship might happen by and rescue her, but the horizon was void of any chance of salvation. Ocean stretched in all directions as far as she could see. As her throat dried and her despair became fiercer, Darcy searched the horizon again, hoping against hope that she might still survive. Squinting through the sunlight that reflected like twinkling diamonds off the ocean, Darcy felt her hope renew. She gasped and sobbed as she spotted land. It was a simple speck of white sand, a tiny beach in the distance, but it was land. As hope revitalized her limbs, Darcy began paddling towards the beach with newfound determination to fight. The ocean would not claim her today. After what felt like an eternity of paddling, Darcy reached the shore. Her feet found sand beneath the water, and she staggered out of the sea, collapsing to her hands and knees as she made landfall. She left the ocean behind and hung her head in relief, almost laughing, but too exhausted to do more than chuckle. Darcy weakly dragged herself up the beach, her brown hair matted, sand clinging to her clothes and hands as she crawled. Breathing a sigh of relief, Darcy looked around at her surroundings. She immediately felt the hope she had found drain away. She was on an island, no more than 5 acres, and empty. No trees, no hills, no food, no water, just an empty field of white sand, like an untouched canvas. Darcy stared at the scene before her in dread. This was not salvation. It was just a different way to die. She may have a few extra days now that she was out of the ocean, but the end would be the same. With no food, water, or even shelter, she only had a few days to survive. As she began to understand the hopelessness of her dilemma, she noticed something shimmering in the center of the island, praying that it was something helpful, though what could help her now, she had no idea. She hurried towards it as quickly as her exhausted legs would carry her. To her surprise, she found a simple glass sphere, half buried. It glinted in the sunlight as she approached. Confused by the presence of the crystal ball, she knelt down to examine it more closely. It seemed unremarkable. There was no intricate detail to it. It didn't look valuable, and yet the ball was pristine. Darcy peered closer upon realizing that it was completely undamaged or marked by weather. It gleamed as though it had been freshly polished to a high shine. Curious, she wondered if perhaps someone could have dropped the ball, someone who had been here recently or was otherwise hidden somehow. Darcy picked the crystal ball up to inspect it more closely. As she stared into its depths, she thought she could see faint outlines moving inside. Ethereal wisps of cloud, shifting and moving and twisting around each other. Darcy sat down in the sand, examining the crystal ball in both hands, turning it over as if expecting to see something new. But the faint images inside continued to swirl, trying to coalesce but unable to take shape. It was the strangest object she'd ever seen. If she wasn't also wrestling with her impending demise, she might have given it more thought. But instead, Darcy began to absent-mindedly draw in the sand, wishing she'd never left England, that she was back home with her canvases, making new art, rebuilding the life that her husband had dismantled around her. She drew a simple pine tree, wishing she had been brave enough to stay instead of run away. The ground suddenly began to shake. Darcy gasped, scrambling back as a pine tree erupted from the sand. Darcy stared up at it with her mouth agape, taking in the sight of the inexplicable appearance. Darcy looked down at the crystal ball again and saw that the shapeless image within had become clearer, though she still couldn't make it out. As she peered closer, though, it almost looked like a pine tree. In shock, Darcy dropped the crystal ball as if it had burned her, the object thudding into the sand with a soft thwump. The instant that the crystal ball left her grasp, the pine tree turned into sand and collapsed back into the island. Darcy stared at the ball, wondering if she had lost her mind, but the ball continued to show swirling, formless objects within. Darcy felt as if it was calling to her, a wordless feeling that came not from her own desires, but the same as when inspiration to create new art would strike. It wanted her to create again. Almost without realizing it, Darcy kneeled and gently took the crystal ball up in her left hand. With her right hand, she started to trace something in the sand, keeping her eyes on the images inside the ball. Without looking, she traced the image of a pond, thinking about how thirsty she was. In an instant, the island opened and a pond emerged, taking shape before her eyes. Sand rose out of the island like growing plants, but impossibly fast. Sand rose up high, hardened, and became palm trees, while more leveled out and turned clear, becoming perfect sparkling water. Darcy approached the small oasis cautiously, then cupped one hand into the water and hesitantly brought the liquid to her lips. It was fresh and cool, soothing her throat in an instant. Eager to drink her fill, Darcy set the crystal ball aside and started lowering her hands to the water once more. But as she let go, the pond shuddered and collapsed into sand. The trees, the water, all gone in an instant. Realization dawned on Darcy, and she snatched the crystal ball up again. She sketched a picture of water this time, and it immediately appeared in front of her, taking shape from the sand itself. Making sure to keep the crystal ball in her hand, Darcy drank from the pitcher until her thirst was quenched. It tasted perfect, and was even cool as though it had been on ice. Laughing in disbelief, Darcy looked at the crystal ball again and saw the shapeless images inside beginning to take on a more tangible form, though it was still impossible to make out. Amazed, Darcy began making more drawings in the sand. She made trees for shade, a cabin, complete with a bed and fireplace, hills and birds, all the while feeling the same sense of satisfaction she got from completing a piece of art, but it felt external to her own emotions, as though the ball itself was pleased with her creations. She felt like it wanted more. So she kept creating. She created more and more. The crystal ball gripped firmly in her hand, filling the white sand with life, like she was painting a canvas. Darcy created animals, butterflies, dry and fancy clothing, comfortable furniture, a cozy campfire, and countless other items. But as she was drawing an apple orchard into the sand, she paused. She didn't remember deciding to draw this. Darcy looked down at the crystal ball and peered into its depths. Inside, the smoky mist seemed to have taken on the shape of an apple orchard. Darcy frowned in confusion as she examined it. Did the ball reflect what she created, or was it telling her what to create? As she considered this, Darcy noticed another imagine within the ball, separate from the orchard, almost impossible to see, as though it was a hidden sketch beneath a layer of paint. Holding the ball up to her eyes, just beyond the tip of her nose, Darcy strained to see the second image. Her eyes shot wide, and she uttered a choked gasp. The second image was of a woman. It was her. The ball had manifested an image of her. It was only then that Darcy noticed something wrong with her hands. Darcy's mouth fell open in a silent scream. Her hands were ghostly and transparent. Even as she watched, her arms also began to fade. She felt a cold numbness beginning to crawl up her forearms, over her elbows, and up to her shoulders. It felt like slowly submerging into a bath of cold water. And the more she felt herself fading, the clearer the image of her within the ball became. She tried to drop the crystal ball, but found she was no longer able to unclench her hand. Her fingers were wrapped tightly around the glass, and no matter how hard she tried, even wrestling against it with her free hand, she was unable to let go. Breathing fast, Darcy fell to her knees and desperately began sketching herself in the sand, hoping that she could regain what she'd lost. But before she could finish the sketch, she felt a powerful surge of disappointment. Just like the alien satisfaction she had felt when creating everything else, this intense frustration and loathing felt removed from her, like she was feeling emotions not her own. Without meaning to, without thinking to act, she cried out in frustration and swept her hand across the sketch in the sand, scattering the unfinished image to the wind. Confused, distraught, Darcy began drawing herself again, only for the same intense feeling of frustration to overwhelm her body, and she destroyed the image once again. Darcy sobbed as she realized the crystal ball was rejecting her creation. The feeling was not her own, it was the ball's. It wasn't letting her reclaim herself. Desperate and panicking, Darcy clawed at the sand, trying to redraw herself again and again, but the intense and primal frustration overtook her each time, forcing her hand to move against her will and destroy the image before it was completed. She opened her mouth to scream, and the sound cut short as she vanished. The crystal ball landed in the sand with a dull thud. The creations sank back into the sand until the island became a blank canvas once more. All that remained, a crystal ball, half buried, and the distinct image of a woman inside, screaming silently as she pounded her fists against the glass. Nothing lasts forever. Story 7. My star is rising. I can feel it. There was a buzz in the air when I entered the lobby of Pinnacle Agency's offices this morning. Something big is coming, and I'm going to make sure that I'm the one that receives it. It's been 6 months since I landed a role here, the top marketing agency in the city, and I am thriving. My razor-sharp focus, relentless drive, and unyielding confidence love organizing the chaos, juggling a dozen campaigns at once with ruthless efficiency. Almost as if cued, my boss arrives at my office door just as I drop my laptop bag onto my desk. Sarah's signature tight bun already has stray pieces escaping the tie. Her cheeks are flushed red, and she is ripping at the cuticles of her manicured fingers with her teeth. She is a fantastic people manager, but struggles with the fast-paced, cutthroat environment that is basically required at an agency as prestigious as Pinnacle. As much as I like her as a person, I know she will be gone soon, caving to the pressure and burnout. When that happens, I will be ready to replace her. Hi, Lydia. Thank God you're here. The bunker account is on fire right now, and I need you to take on a campaign for Lindenberg. You're the only one on the team I trust can handle it. It takes effort to keep my lips from breaking into a beaming smile. Lindenberg is the biggest account at Pinnacle, running over $500 million a year in marketing campaigns for their various business holdings. Leading this project will leave no doubts about my ability to manage a team in the near future. I harness my excitement and keep my reply casual. Absolutely, Sarah. Just send me the details and I'll get right on it. Phew. She lets out a dramatic sigh, wiping her hand across her brow as if she's sweating bullets. Thank you so much, Lydia. It's for their big Mother's Day jewelry sales next month. I freeze while opening my laptop, but Sarah is too exasperated to notice. It's a short timeline, but I know you'll crush it. She gives me a thumbs up and sweeps out of my office. I brace my hands against my desk and close my eyes, breathing in for 4 counts and out for 4. My heart races as images of my mother screaming at me flash through my mind. I push the memory away, focusing on my breath counts so that I can shut out that compartment of my mind the same way she slammed the door closed on me. Keep moving forward, Lydia. No time for the past. Within 2 minutes, I've recomposed myself, sliding back into the relentless, unyielding, and ruthless mindset that has brought me my success. It's nearly midnight when I walk up the steps to my apartment building. The historical high-rise with ornate architectural flourishes, popular in the early 1900s, is stunning. A few years ago, the owner renovated it to be the sleek, modernistic perfection of today's luxury apartments. When I toured it after getting the job offer at Pinnacle, I knew I couldn't live anywhere else. After handling some action items for my other campaigns, I spent the rest of the day taking in Lindenberg's Mother's Day brief and getting the creative team started on some concepts. My shoulders and back ache from the time bent over my computer researching. Swiping my key fob at the apartment entry, I rushed to check the mailboxes and then to the elevator, eager for a long, hot shower to ease the tense muscles. When the doors open on my floor, I see the corners of a boxy item sticking out of the trash chute, jamming it. I sigh and move to clear the obstruction. It annoys me that people don't care about the place they live in. One day, I'll own my own home and won't have to see other people's messes. Reaching for the box, I feel its supple leather and catch the glint of 2 gold buckles across the front. It's a suitcase, a vintage one from the looks of it. My exhaustion takes a back seat as my curiosity peaks. I love visiting thrift stores to find antiques, picking through items that hold the past within them. My fingers wrap around the handle, and I jerk the suitcase from side to side as carefully as I can to release it from the chute. It breaks free suddenly, the force pushing me back a few steps. Twisting my wrist, I turn the suitcase, inspecting the leather for damage. There's just a few scuffs on one corner from being stuffed into the chute. Otherwise, it looks like a perfectly suitable travel bag, no larger than the worn carry-on stuffed in the back of my closet. Once I make it into my apartment, I set the suitcase on my breakfast table and then look through the mail stack, throwing most of it away. A thick envelope with a familiar scratchy script is at the bottom. There's never a return address. She knows I won't ever write back. But the handwriting alone fills me with a toxic mixture of anger and despair. The emotions threaten to bubble up from the dark well I keep them locked in. As I stand in my pristine kitchen, fighting back the ugly tears gathering in my eyes, I feel a warm, comforting energy pulsing from behind me. I turn to the suitcase, the overwhelming anguish receding back into the depths with each step I take towards it. By some sort of hypnotic compulsion, I unlatch the 2 buckles and push open the lid to place my mother's letter inside, then shut the suitcase again. Like waking from a dream, I snap back into the present. The tension in my back and shoulders has released, and I feel weightless, more relaxed than I've been in my entire life. When morning comes, I sing and twirl about the apartment while I get ready for work. I grab my purse and keys, then step out the door. A single foot gets across the threshold when I am doubled over by the same rush of emotion brought on by my mother's letter last night, though it feels amplified to an unbearable degree. I stumble back, clutching my abdomen and gasping for air. A pulse of energy from the breakfast table lashes me with a wave of malice, dropping me to my knees. And then it stops. I get to my feet, moving carefully while nausea roils my stomach, my body unsettled by the vicious emotional attack. Stumbling to the suitcase, I grab it and head back to the door. A contented vibration fills my hand, like the purr of a cat who's caught its mouse. Suitcase in hand, I head out to work. The week flies by, and though I receive many questioning looks from my co-workers, The suitcase is with me for every moment. The Lindenberg Mother's Day campaign moves along quickly. My initial discomfort taking on a project celebrating a person I never had in my life fades away. Anytime those horrible memories try to invade my mind in meetings with the client, I stroke the leather, letting those emotions bleed away into nothing. An incredible state of euphoria fills me with a sense of safety and love I've never experienced before. On Friday afternoon, I am at my desk, adjusting the work-back schedule for the Lindenberg commercial shoot, when Carrie, the office manager at Pinnacle, walks into my office with a vase of white roses and a big grin on her face. "These just came for you, Lydia. Look how beautiful." She thrusts the crystal vessel towards me while I stare at the flowers in confusion. When I don't take them, Carrie places the roses on the corner of my desk, stroking a bud in admiration. "Secret admirer, Lydia." My vision zeroes in on the card and I snatch it up with trepidation. Only one person has ever sent me white roses. "Thanks, Carrie. Could you close the door on the way out?" Carrie's grin falls, but she keeps her disappointment to herself. When the door latch clicks shut, I rip the stationery from the envelope. My fingers tremble as I read the note. "Lydia, I tried to call, but I know you're busy. I just wanted to let you know that I'm getting married in December, and I would love to have you there. Please call me. Much love. Jeremy." A bitter rage boils up my throat. I release a strangled growl, trying to bottle it all back up while I'm still at work. How dare he? Dark energy pulses from the suitcase stored underneath my desk. Instinct takes over and I smash it onto my desk, ripping the buckles open. Shredding the card, I toss the pieces into the suitcase, then swipe the vase, crystal, flowers and water together, in after. The glass crunches as I slam the lid shut. I can barely hear my labored breaths over the piercing, ringing sound in my ears. After a few moments, the suitcase begins its purring vibrations, emitting the calming Zen aura I've come to rely on. It feels stronger now, blanketing me in its warmth. Feeling centered again, I sit back down in my chair and slide the suitcase back underneath my desk. This time, it sticks out, my leg bumping against it when I pull myself back towards my work. Sarah stands in my doorway. The skin under her eyes is dark and her nail beds are red from several ripped hangnails. She looks even more worn down than the last time I saw her a month ago, but the worry etched onto her face seems to be for me. "I just wanted to check on you. You haven't posted any pictures since Pinnacle let you go, and everyone was worried about you with that suitcase." She trails off, unsure what to say. I'm not sure why she's making such a fuss. The past month has been the best month of my life. No work, no stress, just enjoying the little slice of nirvana I've created in my apartment with my suitcase. Looking over my shoulder at the massive trunk taking up my entire living room, I smile. Anything that bothers me, the trunk has taken off my shoulders, letting me bask in a bubble of peace without having to be overwhelmed by emotion. "I'm doing just fine, Sarah. Being fired by Pinnacle has been freeing. I'm not tied down by expectations anymore." She chews her lip, hesitant to believe who I am now is better than the type A corporate climber I was. "You have an eviction notice taped to your door, Lydia. Please, let me help you." The bright red letters leave my door as I take the paper down and crumple it into my hand. "See, no worries." Giving Sarah another beaming grin, I begin to shut the door. "Thanks for stopping by. It was great seeing you." Strolling over to the vibrating trunk, I toss the eviction notice into its waiting jaws. It ripples as the leather stretches a few more centimeters, brushing against the kitchen counter. The massive traveling case looks ready. I take a last look around my apartment, then swing both feet into an eternity of serene heaven, closing the lid behind me. Story 8. Jacob Willis examined the goods laid out on the hastily erected table set in the parlor of the rundown apartment. Various household goods were arranged neatly, each with a pre-printed price sticker affixed. Jacob cast about for any items that looked decently interesting, but nothing caught his eye. One of Jacob's favorite authors had recently died, and he was here to get a glimpse into the man's life, if only through his belongings. Alex Keyes was an author who produced some fascinating works of fiction in his day. Sadly, it looked like Jacob's literary idol had lived a life of dreariness. Keyes wrote dozens of short stories in his early days, but few were ever purchased or published. But after some time, he'd honed his craft and produced his magnum opus, The Fall of the Betrayed. It was a darkly suspenseful story about greed and lust, and had an overall supernatural bent to it. Keyes developed exceptional characters that inhabited a magical world. Jacob's writing career tracked very closely to Keyes's early days. His published short stories gained him enough notoriety that he had established a small fan base. He had yet to produce anything of any great import. Try as he might, he could not put the story to the page. He had the ideas, but they forever remained in his imagination. Jacob hoped he could find something in Keyes's meager belongings that would give him some inspiration. Jacob couldn't help but feel a distinct sense of disheartenment as he perused the shabby apartment. The walls were coated in a greasy patina of cigarette smoke residue, and shafts of light from the torn blinds speared the floating dust. What furniture that was left was battered, torn, and stained from years of use. Jacob saw that his idol had indeed come to hard times. He did not realize until now just how badly those times had broken him. It looked to Jacob that Keyes had given up, that he was merely existing and no longer living a life. Jacob could understand his idol's downturn in life. Keyes' young wife and daughter were slaughtered in this very home. While Keyes was away on a book tour, a murderer assaulted the wife before slitting her throat. The police suspected that the daughter was slain to keep her from identifying the killer. The police and pundits considered Keyes to be the prime suspect in the killings. Neighbors reported the couple fought bitterly and loudly. Keyes stormed out of the home and kept away for days at a time. The prime reason they suspected Keyes was the latest story had too many similarities to the events surrounding the murders. Critics held that Keyes wrote the story as a blueprint for the murders. Keyes' only defense was that he was states away on a book tour. His movements were accounted for, and the police were forced to look elsewhere for a suspect. They eventually fingered a vagrant who had been hanging around the neighborhood and claimed he'd been watching the young wife and knew that the husband was not at home. After that, it seemed as if the wind was knocked out of the writer. Time went by and he was forgotten. Fans assumed he had died, but he hadn't died. Not until now. The story goes that he had died in this very flat, sprawled in his easy chair. He was found by his landlord, looking for the late rent. Jacob had heard the stories, and with a macabre sense of awe, had hoped to find the chair amongst the furnishings being sold. To his chagrin, it was not among the items in the flat. Kitchen items were laid out on the kitchen counter. Bedroom items were laid out on tables in the bedroom. The office items were laid out on the expansive writing desk. Jacob had no interest in the mundane flotsam and jetsam, and he left that to the other rummage sale folks. His disappointment in the lack of interesting items was profound as he perused the offerings. Ordinary items littered the desk. An ancient Smith Corona in fair condition took up residence on the center of the desk, among the various mundane office supplies. He rifled through desk drawers searching for valuable wares, but none were found. In one drawer, he found a key. It was amongst a mass of rubber bands in the top drawer. The key looked old and of the type to lock a case. Could it fit the typewriter case? He checked it and found that it didn't fit. He looked around the room and noticed that there was a small wing chair in the corner. Next to it was a table draped with a stained cloth. Jacob lifted the cloth and found an old steamer trunk with a locked clasp. He fit the key into the lock and it turned. Inside the chest, he found numerous boxes the size and shape of a ream of typewriter paper and manila envelopes, all neatly arranged within the trunk. There must have been a dozen boxes in there, and even more manila envelopes. He removed the top boxes and read the neatly printed labels. The titles of the works were familiar to Jacob. He knew of them and had read most of them, but there were several that he had never heard of. He was astonished to find a box labeled with the title of the book that was attributed to his family's murder. Jacob felt a sudden elation. This must be the manuscript of that book. He lifted the box out of the chest, and it rattled a bit. When he opened it, he found a black-cased pen atop the pages of the manuscript. Jacob was enthralled. He was an aficionado of fountain pens and had several of his own. This was a fountain pen that was from one of his favorite authors. He shuffled through some of the pages of the manuscript in which the pen was found and examined the pen itself. At first glance, the pen appeared to be ancient. The shaft and matching cap were turned from what seemed to be bone with etched designs that reminded him of scrimshaw. He pulled the cap off to inspect the tip. It was thin like a whip blade, but well formed. Jacob lightly shook the pen and heard a subtle sloshing noise indicating that the ink was still liquid. He'd assumed that the ink had dried as there was no leakage onto the manuscripts. Tentatively, he tested the pen against a page of the manuscript. He turned to the blank back of the first page and scribbled a sentence. He then compared his scribble to that found on the manuscript, and to his admittedly untrained eye, that the two matched in thickness and density. This was the pen that the writer used to author his works. This was an astounding find. He must have it. He was in the process of placing the paper back into the box when he caught sight of a curious thing. The scribble that Jacob used to test the pen wasn't a scribble. It was a full sentence, a sentence that he had not thought he had written. The sentence read, in neat, orderly cursive letters, "Hello, Jacob, Jacob. It seems like it's been an eternity, but I have finally found you." Jacob's heart skipped a beat and he let out a little yelp. He hadn't written that he was certain, or maybe he had. He wasn't so certain of it. The sentence was more than a little daunting, and it cut through his initial elation. Now he wasn't so sure that he didn't want to drop everything and run from the building. With considerable effort, he took a deep breath and calmed himself down. "Aye," the clerk exclaimed as he threw the pen down. "I think it bit me," he added, clearly startled. He looked at his fingertip, then placed it in his mouth and sucked. The clerk had been handling each of Jacob's purchases as he itemized them for the sale. Jacob caught sight of the pen as it landed in the box. A bright bit of color darkened the pale scrimshaw of the pen barrel. A crimson blot stained the barrel near the nib end. As he watched, the stain faded and appeared to soak into the coarse material. The clerk was too engrossed in his finger to notice the happenings of the pen. "The thing cut me," he accused. "It sliced my finger wide open," he said as he proffered his finger for Jacob's inspection. "Those splinters are sharp. You don't want that, do you?" he asked again. "I'm sorry for your injury, but that is not the fault of the pen," Jacob replied. "See, there are no splinters or hard edges. It's as smooth as a marble," he said as he displayed it in his gloved hand for the clerk to see. The pen was in fact smooth and clean. The barrel and its matching cap now appeared to be made of a heavily lacquered bone. The nib gleamed like newly polished brass. The clerk examined the pen. "The thing cut me," he said petulantly as he completed the sale. Jacob did not like writing his stories on the computer like every other author in the world. He found that when he wrote that way, he spent too much effort self-editing and correcting as he typed, and it took him out of the story and out of his head. He preferred to use a pen on paper and just write. He liked to write in shorthand and let the story flow to the page. Any errors were later corrected in editing, but for the initial draft, it was pen and paper for him. Jacob performed a full examination of Keyes's fountain pen, cleaning the tool, and was surprised to find he did not need to refill the bladder, as it was full of purplish-colored ink. He was a little hesitant when he pulled a blank page from Keyes's trunk stash of paper. He knew he was reluctant to use this particular pen once again. He wasn't sure if he was ready for any new, startling revelations. He felt an odd sense of satisfaction with using the pen and the paper from his one-time favorite author, and acknowledged its rightness. He placed the tip of the pen to the paper and waited for inspiration. And he waited some more. Suddenly, the pen twitched in his hand of its own volition. "At last," he wrote, except he did not write that. His hand held the pen and the pen tip pressed to the paper, but he did not move the pen. "What the?" Jacob began. The pen moved once again. Jacob was startled, but managed to keep a grip on the item as it writhed in his grasp. The sensation was uncanny. "Hello, Jacob," the pen scratched out on the paper. Jacob fought the urge to send the pen flying across the room. He examined the pen with renewed intensity, searching for any anomaly that he missed on his first examination. He unscrewed the barrel and slipped out the contents. There was nothing there but the bladder. He had expected to find some sort of mechanism to account for the movement. Maybe it was a novelty tech gadget that was built to do just that. Some sort of magician's pen trick. "This must be some sort of joke," Jacob said aloud. The pen vibrated in his hand. Quickly he reassembled the thing and touched the tip to the paper. "Ah, that's better," the pen scribbled. "What are you?" Jacob asked aloud. "I'm your cure for writer's block." "What?" "You have a great story inside you. You just have to let it out. You are blocked, emotionally, because you do not believe in your talents. Your mind is your own worst enemy. You do not believe that what you have to say is any good, and you do not believe that you can tell the story that is any good." The pen scratched furiously and produced a string of jittery symbols. The writing was in shorthand. "I don't believe it," Jacob admitted. The pen wiggled in his hand once again. "You will, in time." All you have to do is hold me and put my tip on the page, and I'll do the rest. Can you write my stories for me? No, not at all. As I said, I merely remove your emotional blocks. What you write when you hold me is all from you, just like any other pen. The difference is that you believe I can do this for you. So it's all psychosomatic. I believe, therefore I achieve. If that's what you like, then yes. Then a thought struck Jacob. Were you Key's muse? The pen seemed to hesitate a moment before coming to life. I know only what you know, Jacob. I have no memory of my own. I can feel your mind and see what you imagine, and I bring it out of your subconscious. At least that's what I think I do, because that's what you think I do. Of course, Jacob mused to himself. That's why Keyes rose to such great fame. He didn't produce his greatest works until he found you. That sounds like a great story. Tell me all about it. The pen scratched. Jacob wrote for hours at a time. At first he felt an elation as the story unfolded through his pen. The narrative flowed naturally. The characters were robust, and the images were vivid. Jacob was so entranced with the visions that he felt like a spectator watching a movie in an empty theater. He caught every image on paper and described the action vividly. Jacob preferred action and adventure and far-reaching space sagas. He'd eschewed horror and dark thrillers, both in novels and movies. Such stories evoked emotions he did not enjoy. After a while, Jacob noticed that the images in his mind became darker and profoundly sinister. The more he wrote, the more his thoughts drifted to the darkness. Writing itself became trance-like. When he was in the thrall of writing, images came unbidden, and like many a bad dream, he had to struggle to throw off the pall. More than once he startled from the trance and found himself in a cold sweat and panting heavily. Hours had passed, and he had no recollection of events other than the visions. His hand cramped painfully, and his hands were stained from the ruddy ink as it smeared on the page. There were days when Jacob couldn't bear to take up the pen. The very act of writing evoked strong revulsion. For a time, Jacob tried using a different pen. He had a large collection and chose one at random. He held it expectantly, tipped to paper, and waited. Eventually, inspiration came and he began to write. He waited for the trance to come, but it never came. Under the trance, the words flowed effortlessly. Without the trance, the words came out haltingly and laboriously. The sentences were incomplete. The imagery was muddled. The characters were flat and the plot went nowhere. Jacob threw the replacement pen away with disgust and picked up Keyes's pen one more time. I can't accept this, Larry Saxon said, tossing the manuscript on the desk before Jacob. It's too bland, too cliché. Your fans will hate you for it, and frankly nobody will buy it. Jacob nodded morosely. Well, I tried, he muttered to himself. Then he continued. Science fiction has been in my bones since I was a kid. I could scarcely dream of anything else. I ate up all the stuff that the great authors could produce. It is the manna that I eat. It's the ambrosia that I drink. I aspired to produce stories to equal the greats. I had them in me. I could feel it. You were great once upon a time, Saxon agreed, but not that great. You were good enough to sell a few books, though. You should be proud of that. Are you conducive to a change of genre? Do you think you can sell horror? He asked. What have you got? Saxon asked suspiciously, as Jacob produced a second manuscript from his satchel. This is great stuff, Larry Saxon proclaimed. You haven't written anything this good in years. You'll publish it? Jacob asked with trepidation. It'll be the pride of our catalogue, Saxon crowed. Jacob smiled weakly. You don't look so well. Are you all right? Saxon asked. Jacob was startled. Yes, I'm fine. I've just been working a lot. This new book, it's very dark, Saxon said. It's darker than anything you've done before. Yes it is. What are you getting at? Jacob replied with some heat. Saxon backed off. It's just that it may have taken a toll on you. You're my publisher, not my therapist, Jacob bit back. Story 9. Sighing and looking out into his front yard, Mr. Theodore Maxwell of 288 Baker Lane placed the barrel of his revolver up into his mouth and pulled the trigger one last time. With that, his massacre was ended. It had been a relatively normal morning for the Maxwells, not unlike any other day they had lived since moving to the neighborhood, but it had ended in bloodshed when Theodore went to his safe and proceeded to slaughter every member of his family and take his own life, all before the meatloaf finished cooking. Theodore's body fell just by the large window in the living room. His wife was dead in the kitchen with a bullet hole through her back, and his 2 children were nestled up in their beds with single shots between the eyes. Each shot was that of a professional, a suburban hitman with a vendetta against his very blood. He had killed the wife first, then changed the girls into their nightclothes before putting them down. He was the last target of his own rage, and it took around 10 minutes after the time it was finished for even a single police officer to arrive. There had been one witness to the killing spree, one who still lived to tell the tale of what Mr. Maxwell did, a paperboy who was just delivering the news to the house across the street. The boy, Felix, had looked over just after hearing the second and third shot. He stood frozen for a minute until Mr. Maxwell, dressed from head to toe in the blood of his victims, walked to the window. Felix had, against his better judgment, waved at the man. He had raised a single hand up into the air and rocked it back and forth a few times until he was sure he had been seen. But Mr. Maxwell did not wave back. He sighed, shoulders rising and falling with the breath, and shot himself in the head. Felix described the way that Mr. Maxwell's head seemed to open up at the back, painting all behind with a spray like water from a loose hosepipe, how he'd been sure he'd seen brain coming out, and how he'd seen the bullet lodge in the portrait of Dwight Eisenhower they kept on the wall furthest from the window. He remembered every detail, as he saw them every night when he closed his eyes. Felix hadn't found it necessary to tell the police about the brain, but he had a great time explaining that detail to all of his friends at school the next day. At first, he had been shaken by what he had seen at the Maxwell house, but at school he suddenly found it to be the funniest thing ever. He and his chums took great joy in debating the details of the situation, especially when the police began releasing new facts in the papers over the following weeks. The first of these further official details came out 3 days after the boy's 13th birthday, when the paper told the public directly that Mr. Maxwell had indeed shot his wife through the heart. The headline mockingly read, "The Heartbreak of a Lifetime," which Felix's dad took great amusement in when he read it over breakfast that morning. He had flicked the paper out, glasses on eyes and smoking pipe in mouth, and let out a low, morbid cackle. "Look at this, Marge," he chuckled, holding the front cover of the paper to his wife. "Heartbreak of a lifetime." He read it to her, then pulled it back before she could bring her eyes up to look at it from her knitting. "You hear the guy shot his kids too, God." "Some guys get to live my dream." Bleh. His chuckle suddenly broke out into a full-blown laugh. He slapped an open palm against his thigh repeatedly as he did so. Felix knew his father was joking, but something in those terrified eyes let loose the truth that he was secretly terrified that he would do the same thing at any moment. There had been no sign Mr. Maxwell would do such a thing. He just randomly decided to arm himself against his own family, and what terrified Felix the most was that his father's gun safe was a lot more stocked up. He had been shown the gun safe once, drunk with tiredness after being woken up by his father in the middle of the night. There had been a party, and he had been drinking heavily, and something compelled him to wake up his boy and show him the armory. He slammed the bedroom door open, a mostly finished bottle of red wine in his hand that he would swig from occasionally, despite the fact that most of the contents was now mostly watered down by foamy remnants of his spit that was being backwashed with every sip. "Come, boy." He took a second to get his breath back. "I want to show you something." Something about him felt different. His voice was closer to a growl than to his normal voice. He had probably strained it trying to shout over the music at the party. Felix had wanted to complain about both the volume of that and his father's voice for most of the party, but had been ultimately too afraid to. He was slow. Every syllable was dragged out and followed by a steep inhale. Felix obeyed immediately and was over by his father's side before the rim of the bottle could hit his lips again. As they crossed the landing into the spare bedroom that was his father's office, Felix realized he could hear crying from downstairs. Not his mother. She never cried as long as she was drugged up enough on painkillers, and it wasn't either of his sisters, as they were both in bed. It was a woman, probably one of the many family friends who poured through that house like it was more of a venue than a place to live, and she was crying like a wounded infant at something completely out of his comprehension. He had gone to ask what the crying was about, when the door behind him shut, and he found himself in complete darkness. His father had then lit a candle and used that to light his way over to the gun safe. Once he had inputted the combination, it swung open and revealed the extent of his little firearms fetish. On the inside of the door, his father had made a pistol display case. It held 8 different pistols in order of their size. At the back were the heavier weapons, the shotgun and the 2 assault rifles, as well as the bolt-action hunting rifle, which used to be displayed above the mantelpiece until he was forced to take it down at the insistence of his wife. At the bottom was a neatly organized array of bullet boxes, so many colors and brand names, and all open to show their contents. It was like looking into a candy store for psychos. Felix reached a hand out, lightly brushing the tip of a 9mm bullet and recoiling slightly at the cold lead that he encountered. This is my right. This is the best thing you'll ever receive from me, so don't expect any more when I die. Your sisters, they're getting the money. You get the guns and my books. You don't have no money when you die, then you're shit out of luck. But don't you ever fucking dare sell one of these here guns, or I'll come back and... His talk was suddenly cut off. The crying had moved from the dining room to the front door. Felix heard the door open, and the crying woman add the occasional no, and please God no, into her wails. He bolted for the window. At that age, he had still been too small as to see over the windowsill on his own, so he used a small footrest to launch himself slightly, and he ended up on the ledge with his face pressed up against the window. It was dark out, but everything he needed to see was captured in the halo of a street lamp. The crying woman had turned out to be Mrs. Denver, one of the wives of his father's work pals. She was in her late 30s, and Felix had always thought she was rather pretty. She had been wearing a full-body, black and white polka-dot dress and knee-high black boots. But the dress was torn slightly at the sleeve, and a man was removing the boots from her as another held her arms behind her back. You can't hide the truth. Those were the last words she got out before a third man tied a rubber ball in her mouth to muffle her screams. The men, the ones taking her, looked so normal to what Felix knew men to be in that town. All of them wore suits, finely fitting, and all in a distinctly classy charcoal grey, and they all seemed to have the same short cropped hair, and even the hue of brown in their hair appeared to be the same. He wouldn't have been able to tell any of them apart at a glimpse, but soon noticed that the third man had a scar running from the bottom of his chin to the bridge of his nose, which cut through both lips and left them setting against each other uncomfortably. That man smiled grimly up at the young child and turned his sights back to Mrs. Denver. She tried to pull away from him, but he grabbed her face and brought it near to his. "We can hide anything, my dear," he smirked. "We can hide anything, and we can hide it for as long as we care to hide it for. They say you die twice. Once when your heart stops, and again when your name is spoken for the last time. How about we see which happens first?" That statement seemed to reignite some fire inside Mrs. Denver. Her eyes went wide, and she shook her head against the vice-like grip his hand had around her chin. Her crying turned to screaming. Even through the rubber ball, it was blood-curdling to hear. Felix jolted as he felt a hand on his shoulder. His father was leaning in close to him as he watched along with him. His breath made Felix want to be sick. It reeked of cheap booze and cigarette smoke. In such a concentration, he was fearing he'd get drunk off the smell alone. He hated it, every bit of it, but he couldn't for the life of him look away. Then he woke up. He was so sure he had been awake, but he woke up. He was in his bedroom, breathing heavily, cloaked in that oppressive darkness his room took on at night. He couldn't remember the last time he saw the moon. Maybe it was sometime before he moved to that neighborhood, but it was almost like it had never been there at all. Just then, he felt something calling. It was no louder than a mouse's whisper, but it was loud enough to make him sit up and head for the window. The moon was back, and it was looking through the window at him. "Head to the sign," it seemed to instruct him. Staring, the moon in the eyes, he began to silently run back through the events that had led to that moment. The massacre, the breakfast, the dream. When did he go to sleep? He was probably still in reality at the dining table. He was probably slumped in his breakfast, his father still laughing away at his joke, and his mother still knitting, and his siblings still running around. It was then that he started to wonder if he ever had siblings. Overwhelmed by a dizzying feeling of confusion, Felix placed his head in his hands and held it there until his eyes went fuzzy. Then he looked back out into the world and found out he was on the edge of town. Before him stood Theodore Maxwell, grinning with a chin bathed in blood and a glazed look over his eye. "I knew about the sign." He spoke, his breath sounding like that of a drowned man. "We all did. When you know about it, they come. You either die, disappear, Or you touch the sign, he explained, gesturing a porcelain pale hand at the sign. It was about 4 foot tall, with a large face painted with an image of a green, tree-flanked valley and a river. It stood on 2 mighty legs, buried into the grass beside the road. Okay. Felix knew he was awake now. He never seemed to speak in his dreams. That one confirmation as he sheepishly reached out to touch the sign was enough to know he wasn't dreaming anymore. The wind around his feet changed direction, the sound of the river seemed to grow a little louder, and Felix suddenly felt a little older. When he turned back, the whole town had disappeared. The neighborhood was gone, and he knew he was finally free of that horror.